too. It was funny because my clients were like not happy about the appraisal value.
Oh, really?
3 days ago, the house across the street failed appraisal.
I have like,
Because they're like, well,
I have a notebook I can write on some pages. There's also a little notebook.
Don't really well. We ended up paying through it.
It was funny, I have like,
There's somewhat.
yeah.
Something like that.
Well, you know, that's all right.
Yeah, so because Mine having appraisal bills.
I'm glad you told me that. Thank you.
I
Nice to meet you, husband.
I got my computer on the way. I was sitting there. I was like, yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking about that last night.
I did. You know what? I got so caught up and I didn't get home till the evening, and then it just totally went out my mind. And then I saw you, and I was like, oh, I need to send that. I'll do it right now.
It's good to see you. I'm Adrian.
Oh, Adrian.
Oh, God, it must be 10 years.
It's been a minute. It's so good to see you. Thank you for having me. I'm so thankful that you reached out to have this.
Always. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much.
Everybody's acting.
So I got my sophomore going
Good. All right. Last year was, I was just telling
now we're gonna start on time.
So he's actually
Because Gala had. All right, guys. Look here, up here, up here, up here. So I want to introduce our Adrian. Don't let me call you out.
I'm so sorry. Okay. You might have to do that again.
Of course. There's always one problem child. So I want to introduce Sunshine Moon.
Sunrise.
That's what I said.
That's what I heard.
Here.
That's what I
All
heard.
right, so I want to introduce Sunrise Moving and Storage. You're new vendors to the office, yeah?
Yes.
And they brought us a lovely breakfast. So I'm going to give them a few minutes to tell you about their services. Okay, so y'all introduce yourself. Take it away.
So I'll go first. I'm Paul Salmon. I'm with Beacons Van Lines. So Beacons is the interstate corporate office. It was in a strategic partnership with Sunrise. So Sunrise is our representation here. So the reason why I'm saying this about Beacons is that because we have the interstate authority to not only move you locally, but we move you interstate across state lines. Sunrise is all the moving and storage locally, so you would start with Sunrise and they can coordinate everything from here to wherever. Now we offer an array of services. Sunrise is privately owned here in Atlanta. They're located in Tucker. I'm gonna let Charlene tell a little bit more about her company. But keep in mind the name Beacons and Sunrise, one and the same. It handles all of your moves. And I tell real estate professionals all the time that we don't do anything until you have a transaction. And there's always someone moving in, someone moving out. So we have an inescapable relationship that we don't even realize. Whenever you sell, whenever someone buys, always someone moves in, someone moves out, and most people aren't going to have their uncle moving. So this is a great opportunity to partner with someone like that. So Charlene, tell us all about Sunrise.
So we're family owned and operated. My husband and I opened it in '99 when we had worked for several major van lines, and we just decided to open on our own. We are a military qualified warehouse, so you can assure your clients that they were going to have meticulous care of their goods, not only while it's on the truck or in the field, but when it's coming into storage. So if you have someone who sold a house with this market and they're not ready to get into the new house and they need storage in between, we can handle it all the way. This way, it's just one company handling everything all the way. Like Paul said, whether you're moving locally down to Savannah, within the state of Georgia, all the paperwork will say Sunrise. If you're moving to California, Alaska, it's going to say Beacons. And we can also help coordinate international relocations, whether it's inbound or outbound.
So do you move vehicles?
Yes.
So we do, but it's a third party, usually a third party vendor, but we can arrange for all of that.
Okay, I'll be calling you.
Yeah. And one of the things that, and you guys, I don't know how much time you have for questions, but if you think of questions after we're gone, there's information in front of you that you can just reach out. And even if you don't have a move or anything, just reach out to Charlene and ask any questions, because I figure once you leave here, you may have questions. Alright, so any other questions, anything else? Alright, don't use the information on your desk for toasters.
Alright, thank you so much. Hey guys, so breakfast is there from Chick-fil-A. Why don't you just go ahead and start grabbing stuff and coming back in the room? So Mark, and I'll introduce Mark when y'all have grabbed something. And thank you for the gift, whatever this is. It looks pretty.
You'll love it.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. I don't even have to search for your information. It's gonna be on my desk.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is nice.
And also, if you lose the card, you can have Charlene's information on there.
Clever. Yes.
And especially when it writes nice. It's a stylus also, so it'll work on your phone, your tablet.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
Alright, all three, now just send it to you.
You just sent it to me? Yes.
Yeah. It's the one, I mean, probably one page of it they could get rid of because it's relevant to me, but the front page has all the good information on it. What I use for his farm,
Yeah.
not like when I sold something.
Yeah, and that's what. Yeah, because that would be fine on top of it.
Yeah, so she could just, you can same
Did you wanna get some coffee or some chicken biscuits?
I have some
something?
water.
Yeah, water.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Don't be shy, go get your chicken biscuit.
Mark, thanks for the referral to Sandy, even though it didn't work out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
Y'all are still my number one people always call me.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And it, I mean,
You know, I have to say something.
her comment was not out of whack, because he is having a bizarre amount of money. Like, somebody called me and said, is this a publicity stunt? I was like, no, he just wanted to see what somebody else wanted to write.
I do.
Yeah, I'm really glad.
He did support that. And I did say that too when we did. You know what? She is fun.
All that, I wanted
Because
to
everybody else got it.
and they even said, yeah, this is definitely.
Yeah, because somebody said, we give you had zoning permission to put in townhomes or something like that. But yeah, but no, some of the idiots around him are buying those lots up because they don't want anybody building next to them. Like his neighbor called, but I know what. Yeah, so I'm like, that's why he said, if somebody actually would give me that, he goes, I'll move to one too for all I care.
I would too.
Yeah.
Well, as long as you have someone to.
He decided some folks are gonna invest with him, let him build the house he wants, so keep it part ownership of his property. I'm like, well, write that up somehow, but you want some legal protection? But and they said, we know that value's gonna go up if he was a better house. So, you know, I'll be like, well, I can grab a coffee so I can.
Yes.
Like, thanks for bringing us coffee so we can sit for 3 hours. Yeah, years ago, y'all came to my neighborhood and did a sample appraisal on one of my properties. I was like, gosh, that's been a long time out in Smyrna.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that just says I've been around too long, I guess.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Will you reach that far?
I don't know. That's what I was like. I wonder if I need that.
I'll just keep kicking it though.
Yeah, I will actually go around.
And then, it's basically like somebody who doesn't have any. Or you just have to keep getting closer to me. You're like, we'll be crazy friends. Yeah, and then, and this is just for us. And I put my numbers like on the back. Did you get up at 11 p.m. and write the offer? But they're like brand new. I was like, I don't know that I'm gonna get out of bed at 11 p.m. You wake up like $600. Right.
Well, and it's over.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, it doesn't matter. It's like,
They'll still be there tomorrow. And the next day, and the next day.
Who are we signing?
I have a QR code in my
Oh, you have a
presentation.
QR code, okay.
Oh, there's gonna be technology tests already?
You have what?
Yeah.
You have about 38 people signed up for this class, so I guess they'll be rushing in. Alright, Mark, you wanna come up and introduce yourself? I think the last time you did this class here was how long ago?
Saturday morning. Kids are in 5 minutes.
Five, yeah. Alright, guys.
I'm just contributing.
Including J.O.'s team in back. Russell's gonna tell me your name, so I'm gonna call you out. Hello. So if you don't know who I am, because you're part of J.O.'s team and you're brand, I'm Adrian. I am one of the PC coaches in the office, and I am in charge of bringing you great content and CE classes, so you're better educated than anybody else in the industry. And we brag about that, don't we? We do. Because we do, and we are. So without further ado, Mark and I got to know each other about, what, 10 years ago, maybe? Yeah, because you had maybe a longer time, I'm not gonna age myself. Because Mark had an office down here briefly back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I would just go over Mark, and this was 2002, 2007, 2008, which is a little bit like this, but in a different way, where we didn't know the value of stuff, or just like now, when you price it, but it was the reverse. So I would just run to him and go, blah, 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 it's not appraisal, what's going on? And so I've kept in touch with Mark, because every time one of my newbies says, do you know an appraisal? I'm like, I sure do, right? Mark is very, very educated, he knows what he's doing, and so I had to beg, of course, for him to come. So we have to get on his calendar like way in advance. So you guys, you're gonna have a treat. The last time I took this class with Mark was 5 years ago. Yeah. So Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you would like us to behave today. I cannot promise that we will, because we're realtors.
Well, that's all right. That is
Do you
okay.
guys have some breakfast too?
Well, Adrian, thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate it. I always love coming to this office because, like Adrian said, you guys are probably the best educated realtors in this community. It's evident that Keller Williams makes it a priority to provide educational opportunities for you. So, my name is Mark Durden. I'm a real estate appraiser with D.S. Murphy and Associates. And I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but I see some new faces too. So I appreciate you being here today. For those of you who have never had one of our CE classes before, they are very informal. They are very interactive. I can promise you, I'm not going to be the only one talking today. I can't imagine anything more boring than listening to me talk about appraisals for 3 hours. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll get it taken care of. This is a good sized group to get questions taken care of. If I don't know the answer, I'm sure the answer is somewhere in this room. And I know that we can all benefit from each other's experience and things that we've been through as far as the real estate. So let's go ahead and get forward. Today's class is Mastering Appraisals. This is the very first class that we started teaching, 25 years ago. This is really Appraisal 101. And this is to teach you how to read an appraisal. Does that sound exciting? It doesn't. No, it does not. It sounds very boring, how to read an appraisal. But the point of this class is to show you where to look and what to look for. How many of you, when you get the appraisal back, what's the first thing you look at? Value. Right. What do you look at if the value is what you think it should be?
Finances or with conditions.
Okay, you're in the top 1% because most people don't do that. Most people close it and say, okay, great, check, we're good. But what do you do if the value is less than what you think it should be? Yep, you look at the comps, you go through the appraisal with a fine-tooth comb. And if I said there were sidewalks and there were street lights, then you know good and well, looking at the street scene in my photos, there are no sidewalks or street lights. Oh, apparently Mark's an idiot. So, no, but the point is, there are hundreds of pieces of information in the appraisal And this is, again, today is all about showing you what to look for and where to look for that information. And we're also going to talk about your interaction, your involvement in the appraisal process, and kind of how to make that a smoother process. How many of you have ever had an appraisal, a transaction either completely go off the rails or end up not closing at all because of an appraisal? Right? Several of you, congratulations, you've done that. The good news is, if you didn't raise your hand, you're probably going to be able to raise your hand in the next year.
You will.
So it's going to happen, and we're going to talk about that too. So that's all about me. I'm from here. I grew up here. I went to Weaver High School way back when. I live actually just down Robinson Road. My kids went to Walton. So I know the East Cobb area, the East Cobb market. So if you ever have any questions about that, I can certainly help you. A little bit about D.S. Murphy. Scott Murphy is D.S. Murphy. He started the firm all by himself back in 1997. He is the chairman of the Georgia Real Estate Appraisers Board, very involved in that role. It's a very passionate look at the appraisal industry. One of the challenges that we're facing and have been facing is the lack of appraisers entering the profession. So that's one of the things he's trying to tackle to bolster our ranks. We have offices scattered across the nation, from here all the way over to California. Gosh, in the last 5 years, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in the appraisal industry as far as working and expanding. D.S. Murphy is a little bit different than most appraisal firms. A lot of appraisers tend to be 1 or 2 man shops. We are probably one of the largest appraisal firms in the nation. We're probably the largest appraisal firm in the Southeast anyway. We have experienced staff with geographic core competencies. That's another very mundane statement, isn't it? But it's a very important thing for you to remember. What this really means is that we work where we live. And that's a very important aspect of the appraisal process. I'm sure most of you, if you had an appraisal go bad, it's probably because the appraiser didn't know the market very well. It probably came from a long distance to do an appraisal, and they didn't know the market. And instead of asking for help, which actually they're required to do that by our guidelines, but instead of asking for help, they just kind of throw stuff together and send it on. You're gonna like this. Yesterday, I got a call from an appraiser in Kentucky. And for whatever reason, he likes Cobb County and he likes Coweta County. So he has a reciprocal license agreement. So he is licensed in the state of Georgia. But he called me, he said he was working on an appraisal in Kennesaw and having trouble with it because it was a luxury home, high dollar, huge house, having trouble finding comps. Somehow he got my name. So we ended up talking, and I was like, it's kind of weird that you're in Kentucky, you live in Kentucky, and yet you're doing that here. We'll talk about that. We'll go back to kind of how you can work around that. And we're well versed in all types of valuation assignments. I'm one of 55 appraisers here in the Atlanta market. I'm sorry, residential appraisers here in the Atlanta market. We have commercial appraisers, and we also have a home inspection division. I don't know if you knew that, but a few years ago we started our home inspection division. So there's a lot we can help and provide. So here's my contact information. If you want to take a picture of that or take note of that, if you have a question past today, you are more than welcome to call me, text me, send me an email, whatever you want to do. I'll be glad to help you and answer your questions. I know a lot of times it can be confusing about how to make an adjustment, what do you make an adjustment for, things like that. So if you ever have questions, certainly please reach out. All right, here's the hardest part of the class. This is our sign-in page. Now, take out your phone, don't take a picture, but use the QR code.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You might have to turn off the light
Oh.
so you can get it.
Where do I do that?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, get it.
How's that?
Oh, there you go.
You can read
As long as they won't fall asleep.
This is gonna take you to a website where you're gonna fill in your name. The sign-in code is just today's date followed by KEL, so 042822 KEL. 042822 KEL. 04.
This may take half the class.
KEL. So, put in the sign-in code. It's gonna ask you where you are. We are in person. You're in Georgia. Yes, you hold a real estate license. It's gonna ask your license number. Please put in your email because you're gonna get a confirmation email when you successfully sign in.
Yeah, I'm also on. Is it on Zoom? All right, give me that, sign-in code again.
It's right up here.
No. Oh.
Yes. Sorry. The sign-in code is up here in the red, 042822. So today's date, followed by KEL.
Yeah,
Should the confirmation come that quick?
It might take a minute.
Okay, I'm like, oh.
So now, once you put all your information in, you click next, you're going to get an email, but also you're going to get, the screen is going to go back to where you started. So it's like it's refreshed. If you've refreshed and it's an empty blank form, you successfully signed in. Okay? So refresh equals success. Is anyone having trouble with the sign-in process?
I'm back to my screen.
Then you're good. If
Then I'm good?
if it's blank, if it's refreshed,
Yeah,
then you successfully signed in.
okay.
But it doesn't say that, it doesn't say that, just like.
No, that means you've done it right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you get back to a blank form to fill out again, that means you have successfully signed in. Is anyone having any trouble signing in? I want to make sure you get your credit.
Okay, Academy successful.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the confirmation email comes from Academy
I know,
at,
but I don't have it.
Academy of Real Estate.
yes, Academy of Real Estate. Thank you.
I'm trying it just for you to see.
It might go to your junk mail, but as long as you've got a refresh screen, then you signed in successfully.
He needs help getting to it.
What's happening?
And it came back a blank screen, but it doesn't mean.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Any questions about signing in? Okay, then let's go forward. So today's objectives, I quickly identify the major areas of the report, identify the red flags if present in the report, kind of where to look, and also effectively explain the information in the report. So, what's an appraisal other than an unbiased estimate of market value based on an analysis of the subject property using 3 approaches to value? What's a one-word definition of an appraisal?
Value?
Value, no.
Opinion?
Opinion.
Opinion.
Opinion, yeah.
Gold Star Christmas.
Yeah, an appraisal is just an opinion of value. Now, the opinion that I'm going to give you is based on certain data, criteria, facts, and a process that we go through. But it's just an opinion, and don't we all have one? Yeah. which is why two appraisers can appraise the same property and come up with different values. Now, we should be close to each other. We should be probably within 5% of each other. But you've probably also seen lots of examples of two appraisals that are very different from each other. And we're appraising the same house, and if we're looking at the same market, the same data, the same comps, how can it be so different? Well, there are a few reasons for that. And I always tell people, be careful to avoid comparing an appraisal on one house to an appraisal on another house. Okay? I get this fairly often when I go to do an appraisal, and they'll say, yeah, my neighbor's house just had an appraisal done, and it came in at blah, blah, blah. And it's not near as nice as my house. It may not be as nice as your house, but it might also be a lot bigger. Or different factors. It might be on a lake or whatever. So I caution you to not compare one appraisal to another. That tends to not be a very good comparison. But yeah, the opinion again that also implies that it's very subjective. And real estate is inherently subjective, isn't it? But the appraiser is tasked with performing an appraisal in an objective manner. How do I do that? If it's so subjective, and I'm a human, and I'm looking at a house, and I have my own likes and dislikes and things like that, how does an appraiser objectively appraise a property? Well, again, we have to go back to the facts of the property. It has hardwoods in the living room, dining room, kitchen, and foyer. And the comparable has hardwoods only in the foyer. Well, that's a fact. Those are two different levels of quality, and so we can make an adjustment for that. So that's a little bit of how we kind of go through that process, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. I like this. You've probably all seen this before, but it illustrates how value is different to different people, and then that's the subjectivity of it. Here's what your buyer thinks of your house. Here's what you think of your house. And I think we're all a little bit guilty of thinking a little bit more of our own homes than anybody else does, which is fine, that's normal. The lender, they're not quite as impressed with the house. And this little bitty picture, that's what the appraiser thinks of your house. But the tax assessor thinks you live in a mansion. Again, I like this because it illustrates how value is different for different people. And you see that firsthand when you're working with buyers and sellers. And that's an important piece of the puzzle that you can help the appraiser with. Because you guys have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that you may not realize that you have that will help an appraiser. You know, and you get to hear why your buyer picked this house over this house. And on paper, they might look very similar. And to an appraiser, they look the same. But they picked this one. Well, why? What is it about this house that they picked that one? And that information can make a difference in the appraisal process. Believe it or not, something as simple as that can make a huge difference. A good example, I was working on an appraisal, and one of the comparables that I was looking at was coming in a good bit lower than all the others. And so whenever I have an outlier like that, especially if it's high or low, any outlier, I always want to call those realtors and find out, why did this sell for less? What do you know about this property that made it sell for less? And believe it or not, the realtor said, and I'll paraphrase, but she said, you know, how do I put this? There was an odor to the house from cooking. An odor that you couldn't get rid of. And that fact alone caused most of the buyers to walk away from it. But how many times do you read that in your listing? Never. Right? You're not going to put that in your listing. So that's a piece of information that made a big difference in the appraisal that I wouldn't have known that if I didn't reach out to a realtor. So. Appraisers do have to be licensed. It's become fairly difficult to become an appraiser. It takes about 18 to 24 months once you decide you want to do it. So you have to take a series of classes. I believe it's 75 hours, then you pass a state exam, and then you are a registered trainee. Once you're a registered trainee, you have to go to work for an appraiser, and you have to get 2,000 hours of experience in no less than 12 months. So it's going to take about a year to get that experience, which sounds like a lot of hours, but it's not. Working full time, it's very easy to do. But then you have to take another 90 hours of classroom time, pass another state exam, and then you're licensed. So it takes a while. You have to really be motivated to do it. Which is why we're not getting a lot of college graduates coming into the profession, because they don't want to spend 4 years in college and another year and a half to 2 years working as an apprentice almost before they can really start making any money. So that's one of the challenges. But that's the process that we go through. The next step is to become certified, which is not required by the state. You don't have to become certified, but a lot of appraisers choose to do that for several reasons. But it means you've been in the business at least 3 to 5 years. You can appraise several different types of properties, different price ranges, things like that. You can become certified residential or certified commercial, certified general, which is just a commercial appraiser. So, how many of you were not in real estate in 2009? Wow. So, in 2007, 8, and 9, leading up to that, the market was doing this. Like Arthur said, you couldn't list a house fast enough. And it was pretty easy to appraise on. But then all of a sudden the market did this.
That's what I got.
And there was nothing happening. So, thank goodness for our federal government and their infinite wisdom, they brought about some changes. Surprise, right? So, first, one of the things it did, Fannie Mae changed our adjustment parameters. We've always had to have at least 3 closed sales. That didn't change, but now we have to have at least 2 closed sales that occurred in the last 90 days. Now, this is if you say the market is declining. Okay? So, in today's world, this doesn't apply, but it will come back, I'm sure. But we have to have at least 2 closed sales in the last 90 days. So, those of you who were in real estate in 2009, what was not happening very much in 2009?
Not a lot of sales.
Not a lot of sales,
Not
right?
a lot of sales at all. It took us, so I was on the mastermind call and looked in the chat and somebody said, yeah, I don't know what's happening. She's new for 4 years. I don't know what's happening. I listed my house for 8 days and we haven't had an offer. And I just busted out laughing because I remember when we got something on the contract in 30 days, we made big flyers and we told the whole neighborhood back in 2009-ish, whatever. Yeah, and but now 8 days and you panic because you don't have a contract.
Right. Yeah, very different dynamic now.
Yeah.
But in 2009, there weren't a lot of sales going on. And so suddenly the appraiser is facing kind of a difficult situation because there are not a lot of sales to choose from. And so I need 2 in the last 90 days. So that meant that a lot of appraisers had to start expanding our search parameters. Well, that's fine if you know the market. But if you don't know the market very well, how do you know how to expand your search parameters? Do you just draw a 1 mile circle? Because that's a rule, right? Yeah. Is it a rule that you have to have you have to have comps within a mile circle? Is that a rule?
No, not really.
No, it's not. No. A lot of people think that it is because it's been around forever and ever. It's just a guideline Fannie Mae put out a long time ago that said, it'd be great if you had comps within a mile. Well, yeah, it would be. But more often than not, that's not possible. So, by expanding your search parameters, you have to define your market. And especially here in East Cobb, there are a lot of markets are defined by the school district. because schools are driving the values in most markets, but especially here in East Cobb. So, if you don't know the market, you could expand your search parameters and end up in a different school district, which could completely derail the appraisal altogether. So, but one of the things that a lot of appraisers did, which isn't right, they did draw a 1 mile circle, and they found 3 sales within that and 2 within the last 90 days, and they used those as comparables. Notice I said they found 3 sales. They didn't find 3 comparables. And that's a big difference. Just because something sells doesn't mean that it's comparable to your house. Right? Okay. All right. Also, we have to have at least 2 active or pending sales, which I like that. Especially, well, any market is good, but especially when the market is very dynamic, like we are right now, we really have to rely on those pending sales. And I get this all the time. Mark, how do appraisers keep up with the market today? Because everything, it seems like everything is going well above list price, and you got multiple offers, and it's just not making any sense. So how do appraisers keep up with that? Well, the best way we do that is to analyze the pending sales. So every pending sale that I use as a comparable, I'm going to call you, and I'm going to ask you, what's your sales price? And more often than not, the realtor is going to tell me. Every once in a while, I'll get a realtor that says, I'm not really supposed to tell you that. I'm not allowed to tell you that. Well, as long as you have permission from your client, you can tell anybody what it is. So, if an appraiser calls you to ask about your pending sale, please help them out. Because, again, that pending sale is the most recent activity in that market, because someone wants to buy it, it's under contract, it just hasn't closed yet. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to close, but I can't hang my hat on a pending sale. But if I can know what that sales price is, especially if you're over the list price, I can use that to make an appropriate time adjustment or the appreciation adjustment. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah.
Do you put the pending sale in the report? Because I was told yesterday that they're not supposed
Appraisers aren't supposed to put pending
to.
sale.
Pending sale in the report. That's what I was told yesterday.
Who told you? Please
I'm
tell me.
not gonna say.
Please don't tell me an appraiser told you that.
No.
Okay. No, yeah, I put them in my report with all the other comparables. I put them at the end because
So
they're
you
pending.
can use them.
Yeah, of course.
Because
We have to.
right, I mean, that was my thought process, because a few weeks ago, I was in a situation where I was, making an offer on a home where the list price was 407, but I ended up finding out that it was under contract at 435 cash, and it was listed at 407, but then the other comparable house that closed at 407 was 379, and it was like 1 month, it went from 379, 407, and now 435, more than $50,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you not factor that in,
Well, that's just it. Again, that's the most recent market activity, which shows me what that appreciation rate should be. Absolutely, that makes
So
a
you
huge difference.
can.
Yes.
Hey, Mark, I'm surprised to see active, so how does active help you? I mean,
Well,
anything I can see.
honestly, I if I can choose between active and pending, I'll choose the pending all day. Because in active, you can ask whatever you want. Now, the actives do help me by looking at the days on market. Because if it's active and it's been on the market longer than most everything else, well, that tells me there's something about it. And so that means I can probably stay away from that particular property as a comparable, because it's not, in my opinion, it's not very reflective of that market. Because if it were, it would have already been under contract or pending. All right, so other changes that took place. Fannie Mae changed our supervisory requirements. Believe it or not, back in the day, appraisers could supervise up to or as many trainees as they wanted. And I've heard stories of people having 12, 15 trainees under them. Seems kind of hard. It's almost impossible to do. But you can't have more than 3 trainees under you at any one time today, which having 3 would be a full-time job. To review, to educate them, and train them, and show them how to do an appraisal. And so it's very challenging. Also, the supervisor has to go with the trainee to every inspection that they do. So if you need an appraiser at your listing and 2 people show up, 2 appraisers show up, chances are one of them is a trainee. So it'd be worth a conversation. FHA requires their appraisals to be done by certified appraisers. Remember I said becoming certified is optional? Well, this is why a lot of appraisers choose to become certified, not just licensed. Because FHA requires only certified appraisers to do their appraisals. All right, so vocabulary to think about as we go through today. To appraise is to set a value, to estimate the worth of whatever it is. In this case, we're talking about real estate, but you can appraise anything. Jewelry, art, timber, cars, airplanes. If you can sell it, you can appraise it. Value is a numerical quantity measured, assigned, or computed. The value is just the result of the appraisal. Right? Price is the amount someone asked for in this case, your home. Sales price is the monetary price which a buyer and seller agree upon to purchase or sell a home. And estimated fair market value is an estimate of the market value of a property based on what a knowledgeable, willing, and typically motivated buyer would pay to a knowledgeable, willing, and unpressured seller. So, are market value and sales price the same thing? Well, but I've had lots of realtors tell me, this is what the market's, this is market value, this is the sales price, this is what the market's telling us. That's how it is, isn't it? No, market value and sales price are very seldom the same thing. So how is it that whenever an appraisal is done for a sale transaction, I get a copy of the contract, I know what the sales price is, why is it 99% of the time the appraisal comes in and exactly what the sales price is? If they're not the same thing, how does that happen so often?
They're just agreeing with the value. I mean, they're agreeing that they're agreeing that that is at least that value. I mean, like, so rarely do appraisals go over. Occasionally when it goes over, you're excited. You're like, woo, it's 4,000 over.
Right. Well, yes, yeah, in a nutshell, you're correct. But an appraiser who stops at the sales price is really doing a disservice to the client. So if I'm doing it for a sale transaction, I'm probably doing it for a lender. The lender's my client. The purpose of the appraisal is to tell my client, yes, this sales price makes sense, and here's why. Here are all the comps to support that. Or, no, that sales price doesn't make sense, and here's why. One of the things that a lot of people don't like to talk about is the purpose of the appraisal for a lender is not for the buyer to feel good about what they're buying. It's for the lender to make a lending decision. Because if your client, the buyer, suddenly decides not to pay their mortgage, then the lender suddenly becomes a homeowner, and they have to make sure that there's enough collateral there's enough value in the collateral to cover their loan. Makes sense. But I think a lot of appraisers do that, they kind of stop at the sales price. Well, again, I think you're cutting it short at that point. As long as there are comparables and you can support your adjustments and you can reconcile all of that information and it's a higher value, then that's fine. That's no big deal. I think a lot of appraisers think that if it comes in higher than the sales price, it sets off red flags at the lender. Well, some lenders might, but again, as long as you can support your comparables and the adjustments and reconcile everything, It's no big deal. A lot of appraisers don't do that. So, all right, factors that affect value. You probably already know these, but it's worth talking about anyway. Consistency. The more consistent a market, meaning age, style, quality, condition, all those things, as long as the more consistent those things are, it's going to help improve the value. Now, what if you're in a subdivision like, well, a subdivision of mostly colonial style, 5-4 door, drive under basements, and then you have a few contemporary homes on lots that haven't been built on yet. So you have to have a mix of styles and different ages. Well, that lack of consistency is going to hurt the value, especially I think among those contemporary homes, because the majority of buyers in that situation are looking for colonial or 2-story homes, things like that. So that lack of consistency is going to hurt. A good example would be Spalding Drive. You've driven down that road before. There's lots of different style houses, lots of different sizes, lots of different ages, all those things, which makes it's good in that there's a variety of styles and whatnot, but it makes it harder for us because you can't necessarily use one as a comp for the other. Comparing or when you're valuing or listing of property. Condition and appeal. Condition is just how well you've maintained your house. Now, there are a lot of people who need to work on that, I think. But if you maintain your house, how's the saying go? Maintaining your house, the benefit of maintaining your house is not near as great as the sting of not maintaining your house. You never want to give the buyer a list of things to do. And if you do, suddenly if they make an offer, it's going to get lower and lower and lower because of all the things that they're going to have to do to the house. Appeal, if you can appeal to a broad group of buyers, it's going to make it a lot easier to sell that house, a lot easier to value that house also. Quality. Very different than condition. They're kind of tied together, but quality is the level of upgrade or level of upkeep that you've done. You have 2 brand new houses, so the condition is new, but one has laminate countertops, the other has quartz countertops. The difference is the quality. And that's a kind of a piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of appraisers lose sight of, because I know I've talked to Danielle about this. The level of finishes that you put in the house is going to make a big difference. And buyers understand that. They understand the quality that you put in it. And I ask every homeowner when I go to appraise their house, what have you done to your house? And they'll tell me. And the next statement is, and I have my receipts I can give you. I don't really need your receipts. I mean, it's good to know how much you spent, because typically the more you spend, the higher the quality. And that's not always true, but in general it is. So if they spend a ton of money on their appliances and they got top of the line appliances, quality and all that, well, that's different than just builder grade appliances. So that level of quality should be an adjustment. But a lot of appraisers don't do that. They just look at, oh, well, stainless steel appliances, you have it, they have it, okay, we're good. Construction and layout, well, that's just brick versus stucco versus hardy plank versus masonite, LP siding. What am I missing? Cedar, yeah, yep. I just appraised a house. It was a contemporary house. The front and back were hardy plank, and the 2 sides were cedar. Okay, whatever. That was kind of weird. And the layout, that's just your floor plan. Now, the floor plan is kind of evolved a little bit in the last few years, because in the last 10 years, people all of a sudden want open floor plan. Right? Everybody wants an open floor plan. However, in today's world, they want the open floor plan, but they also want a private space where they can go to work. Because a lot of people are still working from home. And so they want the open spaces, but they also want a private area where they can work. They want both, which is kind of it can be challenging, but if you have that arrangement, you're probably going to appeal to a broader group of buyers. Location, what's the saying? How's it go? Oh yeah, location, location, location. It makes a huge difference. In a lot of markets, you move one house from one location to another, it's going to make a difference in the value. There's some markets you move it one block, and it's going to make a big difference. And that comes from knowing your market, knowing what the market expectations are, and knowing the dynamics of that market. So, the example I always use in this class, and in this case, is Johnson Ferry Road. Even in the Walton School District, the further south you get, the closer to the river you get, it's a little bit easier to sell because it's easier access to the river, easier access to 285, easier access up to Roswell. I always do it. So things like that can make a big difference. So just because you're in the same school district doesn't necessarily mean that they're not location differences. So beware of that. Proximity to commercial. Well, everybody wants easy access to the river, to Publix, to the bank, to CVS, to Target, wherever, to the gas stations. They don't want Publix in their backyard, but they also don't want to drive 20 miles to get to Publix. Most buyers. Some buyers want to be 20 miles from Publix, but the majority of buyers want easy access to all those things. And that's what I mean by proximity to commercial.
Okay, so Mark, so that's a factor that affects value. So how do you, as an appraiser, adjust that value? If I'm really close to walk into everything versus I'm 25 miles away from my Walmart.
Well, a good example, I just finished an appraisal this morning on a townhouse on just off of Canton Street in Roswell, right in the middle of everything. And the comparables that I've used were all within a mile, but one was further away and it sold for a good bit less. So that tells me being right there in the middle, right there off of Canton Street, is a huge factor. And so the adjustment that I made for just the location, and this was within probably half a mile away, but it wasn't, well, technically it is walkable to Canton Street, but the folks that I was appraising, like I said, this was, oh God, Hippos, I think, is the name of the rest? I can't remember. Ips, yes, thank you. It was right behind Ips. And they just walk out the gate and everything is right there. But the other folks have to walk about half a mile, which is, again, it's walkable, but it's not near as convenient or not as accessible. And that's I read fairly often, walkable to Canton Street, walkable to the Marriott Square, walkable to the park, whatever it is. That's a big factor. And I think I like it when you put it in your listing. It tells me something about that location. Now, I always look in the map and kind of make sure it's walkable. But that's a big factor. Yeah, absolutely.
So the adjustment varies, right? Because because I think it's hard for us to quantify. Like there was one,
Right.
like if something backs up to Publix in one neighborhood and then the one across the street doesn't, then it's going to be specific to that neighborhood. Like this one sold for 50,000 more, so you can right. So maybe saying
So
it's adjust.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, when we're listing it, what's the amount of?
Right, how do you adjust it?
15,000 more, do we do 25?
Yeah, or how much extra do you get for a lake or a golf course or something? Yeah.
Well, the adjustment I made for that one today, the one in Canton Street, was $50,000. From, this was on Norcross Street, half a mile away, but it was $50,000. Now, to answer your question, what number do you use? It's not always, the number does, it's different for every appraisal. And the only way to know the appropriate adjustment, and this is probably the second most asked question I always get, Mark, what kind of adjustment do you make for fill in the blank or location? Well, the only way for an appraiser to know that adjustment number is to find a comparable that has that same factor, and then find one that doesn't. So let's say you're on the lake. Actually, that's not a good example because I'm not very good on that. Let's say you're on the golf course. Well, if all of your comparables are away from the golf course, you have no idea what the adjustment is. You can make whatever you want it to be. But if you have a comparable that's on the golf course, has a similar view, you can be on the golf course but have a forest behind your house and you can't even see the golf course. That's a different story. Similar view, similar location on the golf course, things like that. And then another comp that is away from the golf course, going through the analysis of those sales will tell you what that adjustment should be. That's actually kind of the nuts and bolts of our CMA class. It's the Appraiser's Guide to CMAs. We dive deep into adjustments, talk about how we do them, why we do them, things like that. And that's we spend 3 hours on adjustments. That's it. We'll talk about it.
Yes, we will.
And supply and demand. Well, if you've been in real estate for more than, 2 weeks, you probably have a handle on how important supply and demand is. You may not totally understand it, but you understand how important it is. Now, supply and demand is always a factor. It's not just in this market because it's so dynamic, but it's always a factor. You always have to consider it. The issue we're having today is there's so little supply and such a high demand is causing values to go higher and higher, which is why you're getting offers well above your list price and waiving contingencies and all those things. And so that's driving prices higher. So that's the challenge appraisers have, again, to keep up with all that. But a lot of appraisers understand demand. They can recognize demand, high demand, low days on market, lots of offers, well above list price, high demand. A lot of appraisers, though, have a very hard time quantifying that demand. So how do you translate that data into an adjustment? Well, a lot of that is our interaction, talking to you and giving you information, and we'll talk more about that as we get through class. But a lot of that comes from information from you guys. Do values always go up? Well, no, you know they don't. But the real estate market and the stock market are very similar in that some days it's up and some days it's down. But over time, there will generally be a positive slope to the graph of value in real estate, just like in the stock market. If I appraise your house every 6 months for 10 years, again, it'll be up and down, but over that 10-year period, I would expect to see an increase in value. That's why real estate tends to be a pretty good investment, which is why a lot of investors. Tell you what, this is probably a good spot to take a break. Now, can we do 10 minutes and not 23 minutes?
Okay.
Promise? All right, let's do that. How are you? You good? Good. Oh, you were not?
No.
What happened?
Oh, yeah.
Well, when I came in,
no one's taking
it, so I
it.
was
What they're doing is
stuff ready.
So did you use
they inspired
It get long.
There we go.
Are your apples trash? You still work on one?
He's rather.
Yes.
So we decided to
Don't allow him.
even if we cut mine by 0.5%.
Did you see the signing code? Oh, in the red?
Hi, how are you?
Just gonna ask you that.
You did?
So I called one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now he's $1 million house. Yeah. Exactly. Well, the other thing is now he's got with the buyer or with the seller in Georgia, after everything should be put in, we're just dragging this along and along and along. It was supposed to close tomorrow. Dragging it along and along, he now wants to ask them to pay for his Airbnb, like to reduce the sales price by how much.
How many trainees are you getting right now?
From the closing to closing.
Do you have to have actively looking for some trainees or you find you? Yeah. So does trainee make any money? Does trainee make any money?
Oh, yeah. They do. It's just, they don't make near as much as they do once they're licensed and certified.
Right. Whatever you want to get comparison before.
And I've told him.
Probably on average.
Directly asked me to contribute. Like I've turned to a friend.
Do they do an hourly?
Well, when a trainee first starts, they're hourly for about a month. Because during that month, they're not producing.
I've done it that way.
And so during that month, I think that you would $15 an hour. Every time. Once they become on a commission basis and they split the fee, they typically make on average, I would say, between 40 and 60,000 a year. And then once you're licensed, you can make as much as you want.
He's gonna let us over 20 hours.
Are you thinking about it? Are you? I'll tell you what.
And if it all works out, it's working.
Share a contact. His name is Steve King. Actually, let me share a grant.
I think you told me this.
Yeah. He can talk to you about.
Finally, I've got it. It's funny because these three. I thought Rob was
What is your number?
404?
Luckily, I have one that's moving out of state, and I'm getting a referral check. So that's an easier situation.
Grant can
I have another one.
specific questions.
Her mother died.
Because it's kind of
So I'm not even
he's a good person to talk to.
if you really want to wait for that march, that one's coming up in like.
Or just online, like easy or whatever.
So yeah,
You can
we're
do that. There are some schools that are
I know where you're at.
I think a lot of people do it online. Do it at their own pace. It's the same material. I think your university gives you work on opportunity like employers to talk to instructors, to hear other people and their conversations and questions and things like that. Yeah. But you're tied to a specific time every year.
Yeah. Did you?
We're trying to capitalize on.
What is your name? Alex? All right.
I'm not.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's crazy.
If it's going to it to say it's full-time, like, there's no way you
Now, when
can
you
do
say
it.
we, are you doing this with your husband?
Oh yeah, that's my husband's
Is that his job? That's much.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, so we're always, like when I was talking about the smart tax,
I was talking to him with this update, man. This is around noon. Talk to him.
So I'm always on the lookout for.
About 5 o'clock. And now, everybody, I think
Well, I've seen some here.
that they won't come for
After
30 days.
you guys bought and turned on.
And Rob's like, yeah, whatever. They can come here. We signed off.
I think if the appraiser was smart, they would say, they would tell the lender,
They deduct the
say, hey,
Yeah, but we're
let me put this on hold.
So last night I go out there and
That was
But then she said, and we got and then they got it
he's talking about storage
which
too.
is a percentage of the, and then they were like, so it's like all over the place. And then she flipped it, and sold it for $370.
Right, so that's, I called him again.
I don't get, I don't think
Well, actually, we're gonna talk about that in a minute, but, like you said, like, you were there, that's a big part. Because he's there, and he's providing information.
And that's why I told you, that's why I told you, I want you to do research and see where you go.
But as long as you're being proactive, you get that best service. And
That was one, that was that was much better. I don't know anything about it, but I thought it was funny. Hairdresser. Yeah, exactly. But if she posted this quote, like her, it was like her, you don't have to read it, it was like her announcement letter leaving. It's a quote from him.
well,
So I read it, and I was like, oh,
because,
RM Drive.
You got money.
So I messaged her, I was like,
yeah,
are you like,
Not yet, no, but I have found buyers.
she's like, take
I've
that
actually
quote.
met
Yeah,
people, like that open house I converted to
I thought it was
buyers.
funny.
I've
Because I was getting her
buyers
all the time.
Yeah,
She's like, how's
but I have not
work
had
going?
the.
Sale.
I was like, I'm
I have not brought
guy,
them.
he's like,
That would be, that's your goal, girl. Get on it.
We're working on a townhouse in Marietta, and we may actually keep it as a rental, and then the one in Woodstock will stay on our house. I don't know.
I hear those stories, oh, I used to, one time when I was learning about real estate on podcasts and things, and these guys.
well, every time I do a business analyze, I have to compare
They would
these costs on the wall side
the
versus
seller's
these costs on
side,
either side, and that
they
would
help
help
the buyer for that listing,
And
they
it
help
changes
that
from
buyer
time to
sell
time.
it.
I think the roads I've ever done,
I mean,
and the leads I've done.
I mean, that's rare, but
Yeah.
it can happen.
yeah.
I was talking to Jennifer Ray.
Yeah.
She lost
You
her
obviously
listing.
don't get
So then went on the market.
Oh, I gotta get some coffee.
Hey, did you text me your information? I didn't have to. Oh, you did? Oh, you worked on it. Good.
I was putting the code on, I heard you said put the date in the code. Put the date in and then the code, it goes the date as well.
I'm sorry, I probably misspoke.
You have your card? No.
We're listing the house and we're just going to sell the house. Because we were waiting for that tenant. And then I kept it set to turn.
I thought it was just me.
No, I was just like sitting here, I was like, did I just drink too much coffee?
Look at all this hot air in here from realtors.
I know.
Let me get that.
Hi.
I just heard your voice. How are you?
Okay.
You're so cute. Did I just drink your
I know, I'm like, I only drink iced coffee, so I'm like, is this changing my body temperature?
Yeah, probably.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started back. I want to make sure we're done by 12:30.
I caught that.
No, you didn't.
I caught that. I can't be on my phone.
It's all right. That's funny. Okay, so the appraisal report is the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, or the URAR. Fannie Mae calls it the 1004. It's all the same thing. Now, here's our subject property today. It's a colonial style house. One little tidbit, I'll put this in for free today. Traditional is not a style. It's an FMLS. It's a choice in FMLS, but it's not, technically it's not a style. So you can impress your friends at your next gathering and say, you know, traditional is not really a style. So here's at the front, here's the back, has a pool, not a new pool, but a pool. There's the side of the pool, little pool house, the left side, the right side. So the first section of the appraisal is the subject section, as you can probably imagine. We identify obviously the address, we include the borrower, the seller, the tax ID number, the legal description. The next section is the contract section. Now, like I said, we get a copy of the contract, and some of you might say, well, if you have the copy of the contract and you know what the sales price is, it's like having the answer to the test. Why even do an appraisal? Right? Because you're just going to appraise it for the sales price, right? Well, the purpose, the appraiser's job is to interpret what the market's telling us. I don't determine market value. I estimate market value, but I don't determine market value. I interpret market value by what the market is telling us. Well, who is the market?
My buyers.
Buyers and sellers. Yeah, buyers and sellers are the market. So the buyers and sellers are the ones to tell us what the market value is. Well, how do they communicate with me? Because very seldom do I meet a buyer. Every once in a while I meet a seller when I'm doing the appraisal.
Through us. Appraiser package.
Appraiser package through us, yeah. Through the contract. That's how the market communicates to me, through the contract. So I get a copy of the contract. It tells me the sales price. We talk about concessions. I also, this is a little technicality, but if the document that I've been provided by the lender hasn't been signed by all parties, that's not a contract. It's an offer, but it's not a contract. It has to be executed by all parties. So I have to check that it's been signed, and I have to check that the seller is the owner of record. And 99% of the time they are. Every once in a while they're not, and usually that's a very simple explanation. But what about the date of the contract? Does the date of the contract have an impact on value? Or can it have an impact on value?
Yeah.
Can? How and when?
Well, what if after you've gone on a contract, there are other things that have sold?
Or how long the property was on contract on the market?
No. I'm just talking about the date of the contract. When did you go binding?
Who cares? Why? Why would we
Maybe
care?
the appraisal has been much further down the line than when you went under contract, so then the value has changed since you.
A good example is new construction. More often than not, a new house, you sign the contract and then they start building the house. Well, what if it takes 9 months to build? Don't you think in today's world, 9 months is a long time? A lot can happen, and a lot probably will happen. So that's a good example of that. Another would be like a lease purchase. Or in today's market, if you sign a contract in February and you're just now getting to the appraisal and the financing and all that, there's a good chance it's going to be, the value is going to be different than what it was in February in today's market. Probably be a lot higher. All right, the next section is the neighborhood section. And this is where you can start looking for some red flags. If I say that the property is rural, or if the values are declining, if there's an oversupply, or if the marketing time is over 6 months, those are red flags. Now, those aren't deal killers, but you do need to be able to read somewhere in the report, why did I check that box? And what does that mean? How does that impact the value? So, if it's rural, really that just changes the underwriting guidelines. And actually it gives the appraiser a good bit more leeway to find comparables than if I said that it's suburban or urban. In a rural setting, it would not be uncommon to go 7, 8, 10 miles for a comparable. And in that setting, that's okay, as long as it's saying rural setting. It's been a really, really long time since I said values are declining. It's kind of funny because before 2009, underwriters told appraisers, you can't make time adjustments. Okay, it's kind of weird, but okay. So once the market crashed, suddenly every underwriter out there was saying, you need to make negative time adjustments. Okay, we can do that. And then, obviously the market turned, and now we are making positive time adjustments on 99% of the appraisal value. I make positive time adjustments. And it's just now that we have seen kind of a tempering of the demand, and you may have seen that too. I don't know. Tell me. Seems like a lot of buyers are kind of tired of it. They're tired of making offers and not getting contracts, and so they're deciding not to buy a house yet because there's nothing available that they want or they can get. So I think that has started again. I wouldn't even say it's slowed. I think it's just kind of tempered a little bit, the demand. So if there's an oversupply, that's a red flag. But it depends on the market, right? There's one segment of the Atlanta market that is historically oversupplied, but that has become such the norm that it doesn't affect value. And it's the luxury market. Because there are a lot of luxury homes in the Atlanta market. And in relative terms, there are fewer buyers of those homes. So it tends to take a little bit longer. They tend to stay in the market a little bit longer. Now, they might stay on the market for 15 days instead of 4 days. So, kind of take it for what that is. And if marketing times are over 6 months, I don't remember the last time I've ever checked that once. But in some markets, that is the case. Now, these are red flags primarily to lenders because that kind of creates more of a, well, their lending decision becomes more complicated because of those factors. We just did this. Okay, here's an example of what would be a neighborhood map that we include. Again, it shows kind of the overall area. Now, is there a difference between a subdivision and a neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah, there is. We all tend to use those two words interchangeably a lot of times, but there is a difference. A subdivision is a much smaller, very, very specifically defined geographic area of homes that tend to be very similar to each other, again, very specific area. A neighborhood is a much broader area and generally does not have specific geographic boundaries, but it's made up of complementary properties. A neighborhood will have single-family homes, it'll have condos, it'll have retail, could have industrial property, depending on where you are, things like that. And so a neighborhood, again, is a much broader area. A subdivision is a very specific location. Now, the point of having this neighborhood map is to show what's around. There's Georgia 400, here's a park over here, it shows kind of what's around that area. Now, this is the test. This is how we determine if it's urban, suburban, or rural. This is gonna be on a test at the end of class, so you might want to take a picture, write these down. If you stand naked on your front porch and the neighbors can't see you, then it's rural. If they call the cops, it's suburban, or if they ignore you, it's urban.
Wait, leave that one.
In 31 years, I've never seen this put to the test, thankfully. But you kind of get the idea.
It's gonna be on all our Facebook feeds this afternoon.
Yes. I'll just copy it from yours.
Yeah, just go ahead and tag Quan.
Tag us all.
It's our tip of the day for our buyers.
That's right. Okay, so part of the process that the appraiser has to go through is to define our market. And typically that's going to be a neighborhood area. Well, in defining our market, I want to define it as specifically as possible. What I mean by that is, typically I'm going to, I'll typically define it as a school district with a certain style, certain age, home, in a given price range. And that's very different than saying my market is all the homes in the Walton High School District. And I do that because the buyer chose this house to buy. And so that tells me what they want, and my job is to figure out, well, if they're buying this, they like this, what else did they look at? So in this market, if you're buying a 2-story, 5-4 door with a drive under basement, that's what I'm looking for as comparables. I'm looking for 2-story homes that were built within 5 or 10 years of this house with a similar level of quality and features and things like that. I'm not looking at everything in the Walton School District within a certain price range, because that's not what the buyer looked at. So, and that kind of gets back to the consistency. If the buyer was buying a 2-story house with a drive under basement, did they look at contemporaries? Probably not. Yeah, some will. Okay, I know some buyers are going to look at everything, but most buyers, they tell you, right? They tell you what they want. I want to buy a ranch in the basement, so I'm all on one level, and my kids can live downstairs or whatever. Well, that's what I'm looking for. That's the comparables that I'm going to be looking for. Now, my job is to figure out, again, which other ones would they probably consider reasonable alternatives to this house. And that's how I find my comps, kind of in a nutshell.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Next.
Okay, my mind is blown with subdivision and neighborhood. I wasn't sure if it was because I'm from Oklahoma, we always said neighborhood. So, Chimney Springs, subdivision. Merchant Swamp, neighborhood. Okay, and then is that huh?
That was hard.
Yeah, 5-4 and a door. If it's not traditional, what is it?
Some people call it colonial. Some people call it Georgian.
Oh, thanks.
Again, this is something that, this is going to show the school district, kind of where you are, what's around it, things like that. The next section is the site section, where we talk about the actual property, the piece of land. A lot of people, when they buy a house, they lose sight of the fact that they're also buying the land that goes with it. It's important to know what that entails, what all you're buying. Is how big is the property? What's the zoning? Do you have a listing? Do you check the zoning every single time?
Yes,
You do? Yeah. Well, it's not a bad idea. Now, in the residential world, more often than not, the zoning is not going to be a factor. But it can be I mean, especially that property that we talked about. That zoning on that property could make a significant difference in the value of that property. So, and it's a residential piece of property, but it's the highest and best use as something else. What about the flood zone? We talk about the flood zone too. Does the flood zone always have a negative impact on value?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Yes.
for you all it does, but for buyers, it
Yeah.
does too, especially the quarter.
Nobody wants to carry that insurance.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, when it is a square that just sold in a flood zone, it went 150,000 over asking price.
Alright, let me say this. That's kind of a trick question because I never say never and I never say always. So, does the flood zone always have a negative impact on value? No, it does not. It absolutely does not. Like your example, people pay well over list price even though it's in a floodplain.
Everybody knows, it listed at 475, I think it even stated in there it was in a floodplain, but you could look it up on the flood map, 475, and it went for 625 in Walton. In flood zone.
There are areas, there's an area right around Chessing Park.
Oh, yeah.
There's an area around Chessing Park that's in a floodplain. People are lined up to buy those houses. They don't care that it's in a floodplain. Now, in that case, they're not really buying the house, they're buying the location. Now, but that brings me to another point is, as the appraiser, I need to know what it is about that house. Why did you pick that one? We talked about that a little earlier. So tell the appraiser that. Talk to the appraiser about why they picked this house. Did they buy it because it's 2 houses away from Chastain Park? Or did they buy it because of the way it sits up on the hill? Or did they buy it because of the kitchen? Did they buy it because of the acreage? You know, if your buyer tells you, I've got 3 horses, I need about 7 to 10 acres. And you show them stuff in Chimney Springs? No. You're going to go out, you're going to find some acreage, and you're going to look for properties that will best suit their needs, best meet their needs. Now, you might find 7 acres that's heavily wooded. That's not going to do them any good. So, something as simple as that. It has acreage, but it's heavily wooded. So, is that worth as much? No, it's not. Not to that buyer, because they want pastures and barns and things like that. You have a question?
Yeah, so are you suggesting that buyer's agent should be in contact with the appraiser before you go to the appraisal, so you know the motivation behind?
Will you repeat the question?
She asked, am I suggesting that a buyer's agent be in contact with the appraiser before I do the appraisal? No, I'm not suggesting that. But we'll go down that path. A lot of you I know, from personal experience, meet the appraiser at your listing. This is a matter of course. I've been preaching this for 15, 20 years. Never, ever, ever let the appraiser in your listing by using the lockbox key. Once you go binding, this is going to sound crazy, take the lockbox off. Because who's coming to your listing after it goes binding? 2 people.
Inspector
And the appraiser. Do not let the appraiser in using the lockbox.
Like even the CVS code?
Don't ever give the CVS code. Because if you let the appraiser in by themselves, you've lost that window of opportunity to talk to them.
Yes.
So, if you meet the appraiser, when they call you, hey, Arthur, I'm calling about doing the appraisal on your listing, what do you say?
Great. When would you like to go out? I will meet you there.
Yes. When are you going to be there? I'll be glad to let you in.
Or the seller will be there.
No. Don't let the seller.
My seller works from home most of the time.
Well, that's true.
Even
That
though?
is very true. It's funny. A A lot of realtors that I talk to say.
And to that effect, they're coached on that.
Good, good. A lot of homeowners don't get that coaching.
Right.
A lot of agents don't want their homeowners to be home because homeowners tend to run them out. You know, and sometimes it's not always beneficial. So, tell the appraiser that your homeowner told you to take it off. It doesn't matter why, just take it off your house. That way, when you meet the appraiser there, you can have a conversation. And I hate to say this, you just can't imagine how much I hate to say this. But more often than not, if you can develop some sort of rapport with that appraiser, you're probably going to have you're much more likely to have a successful appraisal process. And that's the reality. And I hate that that's the case, because you would think an appraiser would be professional enough and confident enough to do it without having to do that. But I think that's true for a lot of things, not just real estate, not just appraisals. I'm not saying you need to be friends with them. You don't have to connect on LinkedIn or follow them on Instagram. Just have a conversation. That way, again, that rapport is going to help the whole process. Now, there's some information that you need to provide for the appraiser. Number one, give me a list of all the renovations, upgrades, things that they've done to your house. Give me that list. The homeowner's already made that list for you. Give me that list. Don't assume that the appraiser is going to notice that there's hardwoods throughout the house. Don't assume that the appraiser is going to notice that there's quartz on every surface, every countertop or vanity. Don't assume that. Give me a list. Then, give me the comps that you use to price the house. Don't give me 300 pieces of paper. You know what I'm going to do with 300 pieces of paper? Throw it away. I'm not even going to go take the time to look through it. Someone actually did that once. They printed they probably gave me 35 sales. Wow. And they printed every page, every picture. I'm not kidding you. There was that many. So anyway, give me the comp that you use to price the house. And tell me what you know about them. Give me your top 5 or 6. I don't need 12. Give me your top 5 or 6. And if you know something about handwriting or highlighting on the listing, that way I know you know something about that. Also, here's probably the most important piece. Give me the comp or comps that's going to kill your deal. Why on earth would you give the appraiser the comp that's going to kill your deal?
Because we're gonna tell them why.
Exactly. Why did it sell for less? And you know that already, probably, because if an appraiser is honest, when I go into the process, I know that you already know more about that house, and you already know more about the marketing and the dynamic of that house than I do. Because you've already done it. So, share that with the appraiser. Tell me why that comp that's going to kill your deal, tell me why it sold for less. It's a house that smelled. That was going to kill the deal. But here's something else. The lender's going to go through this process too. They're going to find these sales. And if I don't explain why I didn't use it, they're going to come back to me and say, well, why didn't you use that sale? It sold for a lot less. And it looks very similar. Yeah, it does. On paper, it looks very similar. But in the realtor's words, it hasn't been. Or it could be a divorce. It could be infested with ants. It could be structural issues. Those are all things that you're not going to put in your listing. And you shouldn't. Have you ever read a listing that said, this house is beautiful, your clients are going to love it, come make an offer, oh, by the way, there are structural issues? No, you don't say that. But you know that's a factor. So if you've been in or been involved with the comparables somehow, tell me that. again, you probably already know that. So, never, ever, ever let the appraiser in by themselves and provide all this information. That is invaluable. That will 9 times out of 10 make this a much smoother process.
We've been also noting, and I don't know if this is helpful, so you might be on our side, but we'll say we had 12 offers up to this price because we want to reinforce the fact that just because this guy paid $500 million, 6 other people were willing to pay it too. They just didn't have as good of terms. Because we've heard appraisers come back and say, well, you only listed the house for $500,000, so obviously that's what the seller thought it was worth, and they came back with a lower value because that was what list price was. So we're trying to beat that by, as soon as I take a higher offer, I'm bumping my sales price up right before I go under contract, so that the way the appraiser sees the higher sales price, and it hopefully helps them push it up.
See, Chrissy, I'm a little.
We don't want to play games, but we keep getting burned by bad appraisers.
I'm mixed with that because, and I see what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with it.
Okay, that's your opinion.
Because the appraiser, and part of the appraisal, I have to talk about the listing history. So if you listed for $500,000 and in 3 days you got an offer, it went pending. Oh, and then you increase the sales price to whatever, $550, whatever the sales price is. Well, I already know that you listed it for $500 and have a contract that says they're paying $550 for it. So to me, that has no bearing. The listing history has no bearing on my process. I have to report it. And also, I think that's going to water down your skills and your abilities because suddenly you've gone from 108% ratio to 100% ratio.
Because I've seen some agents doing it as the offers are coming in, they're not due till Sunday, they bump up the price as a way of saying, look, you're going to at least be here if you want to be at the game.
I can see that. But I don't think that helps you. I don't think that has an impact on the appraisal.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as telling the appraiser how many offers you have, absolutely. Tell the appraiser how many offers you have and how long did it take you to go under contract. That shows demand. That evidences demand. And so that's a very important step in the process.
Excuse me, do you think what you're sharing, all appraisers are open to it? Because I know some appraisers are a little bit arrogant and they don't want to necessarily have any information from the listing agent.
You're right. There are some like that. There are some liars like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Two in the whole city. No, and we were talking about that earlier, how you're going to run into appraisers who say, whoa, I don't want your help. I don't need your help. Let me do my job. Okay, that's fine. However, you need me to get the house because it's locked and I have the key. And there are some, and I say take your lockbox off because there's some appraisers who don't need the CVS code. And if they see that it's vacant, they'll just show up and they won't even tell you about it. And then you don't even have a window then. So, shame on the appraiser who shows up thinking that it's vacant and they just go whenever. And suddenly, oh, there's not a lockbox in the house. And then they get mad. So yeah, you're gonna run into that from time to time. But my point is, be proactive. Don't be reactive. Don't get involved once the appraisal goes south. Be proactive. At least you can go back to the lender and say, I met Mark there. I gave him all this information. Here's what we talked about. All these things. Instead of, I can't believe Mark came in the loan. Why is he such a bad appraiser? And the lender's going to say, Mark did a good job. He met all of our standards. But if you're proactive, I'm not going to say that's going to solve the problem, but at least you're going to be on the front end of it and not reacting. Again, have a conversation with them. Even the hardest of folks, if you can have a conversation with them, they'll really soften up a little bit.
Quick question.
Yes.
Do appraisals, I may have missed it, do appraisers have access to MLS listings?
They should. Yeah, they should. If they don't have access to MLS, Georgia MLS or FMLS, that's a
That's a
huge red
problem.
flag. That's a huge red flag.
Sometimes there are codes listed right there in the private remarks, CBS codes, logbox codes, and all this.
Two questions, Mark. About his question. Sometimes we receive an offer or went under contract before we put it on FMLS and Georgia MLS. Is that a red flag for the appraisal?
No.
No, okay. My second question is, when we receive a higher price, we receive multiple offers and the highest offer has been accepted. Some agents recommend me to change the price on FMLS for the price that we went under contract. I don't think that that impacts your opinion on that one, right? What is the benefit to do that?
Well, I think like you said, Christy, it'll indicate to the other realtors, here's the minimum. You know, here's where we are right now. But can't you get that same information from a phone call? Or a text? Hey, my clients want to make an offer. Or we're thinking, I don't know how that dynamic works.
So I don't see the benefit to do it, at that point, because we are already under contract, and most likely the agents, when you call the listing agent, since the property is not sold at that moment, they will say, I'm sorry, I couldn't provide that information to you because the property is not sold yet, or sold yet.
Yeah.
It'll be listed.
But the buyer's agent always tells.
Right, exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, so I'm usually so used to working with buyers, but I had a listing recently. So it had multiple offers. They all came in 30 to 40 over asking. We went for the one that had zero financing, zero whatever. So, and the appraisal, the seller was at home to let him in.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I should have gone and let him in until now. So yeah, he was at home and he let him in. Didn't think there was any issues. It's a lovely house. However, it came back 9,000 short. So we could have easily said we'll take your earnest money and go, because they didn't have the money to meet it in the end.
Yeah.
But they decided to my buyer just agreed to drop the price a bit, and they brought it up a little bit. So we come to an agreement. But what I'm saying is, so if I'd had this class before, should I have then gone back and said to the lender and the appraiser, we had all the 14 offers all over asking, and this is not even the highest one we went for. Can you reconsider?
Yeah, you can go through that process. Every lender has a reconsideration of value process. The goal is to never get to that point, though. Because a lot of appraisers, and you challenge them, they dig in their heels and they say, wait a minute, I'm the value god here. This is what I did, so no, this is it. Actually, I did an appraisal last week, reconsideration of that. It came in less than the sale price. It's a condo, and it was a little, I think the issue was it had a basement. And the realtor was combining the square footages, and so, that's another class. But I had a reconsideration of value. Will you please look at these other sales to support a higher value? Sure. I used 2 of the 3 that they gave me, and they supported the value that I came up with to begin with. So it only further supported my opinion of value. So, and this is kind of ties into our CMA class too. Square footage, basements tend to be the sticking point between realtors and appraisers. Like I said, this condo was it was like 800 square feet, but it had a basement of 400 square feet. And so they were making it into like a 1,200 square foot condo when that's not how appraisers are going to look at it. That's another class. But that was the issue. Because every comp that they gave me was 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. with a basement. And so all the ones that all the comps that they wanted me to look at were much larger than the condo I was appraising.
Can you or would you use completed appraisals on refinancing? And I've actually known an appraiser that did that on something I was working on. Because there were not any comps, but was aware of refinancing that was done recently in the neighborhood and use those appraisals.
It depends on how recent it is. If it's within the last 3 months, absolutely. If it's 6 months, those comps probably aren't going to be recent enough.
I have a question. With Ribbon, I had a listing where it was a townhouse and the listing was 238 because, well, no, the listing was 238, sorry, it's 220 because there was a home that was pending closed, well, was closed at 220. So the appraiser though appraised the home at 196.
The one that was under contract for 220. Or yours?
Mine.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Because the home that was under contract for 220, they put that it closed at 196. Yeah, here's why. Ribbon was involved in that home as well as my own. However, because Ribbon wasn't the one buying it, but the buyer was with their loan, the appraisal came in lower because they were looking at the other comps from 3 months before. But my home went under contract for 238 because a buyer wanted to pay 238 for it. And it was listed at 220. And that buyer was under Ribbon as well. So the appraiser on my listing put the home valued at 200. But the home that was for 220 closed at 222. But it didn't report that in FMLS. They reported it as sold as 196. And they said it's because the buyer loan was for 196 or it was valued at 196. So that's what the buyer was borrowing. And the gap, the appraisal gap was covered because of the protection that Ribbon, gives to 222, yes.
Okay.
But they didn't put that in FMS, and I was like furious. I was like, this is crazy. Like, how do you do that? It's because they said the way how the altar was, was done by the closing attorneys, that's why they only use specific closing attorneys, was that Ribbon just paid an appraisal gap, but this is what the home really sold for, 196, and I thought that was insane.
Ribbon has a language that says that if it doesn't appraise, then the seller agrees to reduce the price and Ribbon pays the seller. So the sales price actually gets reduced even though the seller is getting the higher value.
Correct.
Which could be a problem.
But that's a problem because then it affects all the appraisal values for the rest of the neighborhood. So I challenged it.
Will the deed show that it sold for 222?
See, I don't know what the deed, I didn't go that deep with the deed, but I still challenged the appraiser. So she brought it up by like freaking $4,000 and said it was worth 200,000. Even though I told her, I said, this thing really was, because I got all the documents from the other listing agent, and I said, this thing is 222. So
Well,
where you get 200,000, 196 from.
An easy way to come out, I think, is to show them the deed, because the deed stamps will show what was actually paid for the property.
Yes. It could be a problem going forward if Ribbon keeps doing more deals and it doesn't appraise, because they're gonna think you reduce the sales price of the house and then they pay the seller directly.
But the seller, that's the same.
Because technically the house.
But the subdivision suffers because suddenly.
And then it presents a whole problem for the neighborhood.
That, from an appraisal standpoint, that will become another open door Zillow type situation where if I see that open door or Zillow or one of those anyway, I tend to stay away from those just because they're not, I don't think they're really representative of the market.
Good, we appreciate you doing
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Hopefully Mark Twain's on that list.
Tell all your other friends about it too. We want to read all of them.
I wanted to just say something back there about the one that didn't appraise where the money came back. I don't remember her name.
Grace.
Yeah, Grace. On the listings where people are waiving appraisals, always get proof of funds up front, that they have the money to cover it.
Right.
And then you take care of that problem up front. Because if they can't show that they have a lot of money in the account, then you won't run into that problem. So if you have that going forward, I'd like all of mine where people are waiving, or I'm just asking for proof of down payment and appraisal gap coverages.
Yeah, I was
So-
told they had it all.
Right, but I
didn't
mean,
see
you
it.
ask for
And then they had an emergency.
So you get
And
it.
he went.
Yeah,
You
so
get
I
it. Treat it like a
in the
cash
offer
buyer.
remarks, I tell them they gotta provide it with the offer, it just saves a lot of time.
Or you could also call the lender, I usually call the lender and say, hey,
Yeah.
these folks have money to cover it, you have the proof. And I put it in writing, in an email, so that I make them email me back, so that I have it in writing.
But sometimes lenders don't check that, they're assuming that the buyers are telling, if they say they've got the money, then they're gonna believe them, cause it'd be coming from a gift or something else, so. You
Yeah.
show bank statements and you put it in there right away, it comes with the offer.
I did check with the lender, but I didn't ask for proof. They just said they paid for it.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so you'll use, like refi appraisals if they're recent. What about a pending appraisal? So like, so say like there's two houses that are the exact same in a neighborhood. One is, you know, had their appraisal and the other one has not. Would you use the appraisal from the other exact same one that's like across the street? If we had a copy of it?
You mean for information and data?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's not that uncommon that a homeowner will offer me a copy of an older appraisal.
Yeah.
You know, if it's past 3 to 6 months old, the comps aren't very valuable, but the sketch could be helpful.
It was only like a week old.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
He told me no. He was like, and then he used completely different comps. And I was like, I hate you.
Really,
It was my arch nemesis. It's fine.
But yeah, you can certainly do that.
Okay.
So in this case, the listing agent is the one that's gonna go meet the appraiser, or can the buyer's agent to help?
The buyer's agent is more than welcome to be there. I'm gonna call up the listing agent though, because you're the one who's responsible for who's coming in and out of that house. Good example. And, it was a realtor from this office, actually. And this was about 2 years ago, right when things were starting to get crazy. I did an appraisal on Waterford Green, got it, and the sales price was well above the list price. And my first thought was, there's no way this one will price. No way, it is not going to price. So, called the agent, she met me there, the buyer's agent met me there, I happened to know both of them. And so that was, I think, why they both met me. But they provided all that information that we just talked about. And that was one of the easiest appraisals I've ever done. And it was all because of the realtors. It absolutely was. Because they have, you have insight that appraisers don't see.
I had one where the listing agent was in Buckhead and the house was in Kennesaw, and he was like, I'm not going out there. And so I said, well, you give me the appraiser's information so I can do the appraiser's package. And he gave it to me and I gave it to the appraiser. And they're appraised, because these clients were gonna like suck every last dollar out of every account that they had if it didn't appraise. And fortunately, and we were well above asking and it appraised, so.
So if you're the buyer's agent, talk to the listing agent. Make sure that the listing agent's doing what should be done to help the process along.
Heck, don't just talk to them, offer to do it for them. Yeah, because I mean, I've seen some amazing stuff come from buyer's agent. I'm like, I'm happy to put this with mine. It's great.
Yeah.
That's what happened in this.
What is a bedroom? What makes a bedroom other than a window, door, and a closet?
Whatever I call it.
Whatever you call it.
That last one though, that last one
Easy
though,
access.
okay.
Yeah.
You got some explaining to do with that.
Yeah.
last one.
So to be a bedroom, it has
You
to
can
have a
market it that way,
window,
Althorine.
door,
Just
and a
can't
closet. It also has to have convenient access to a full bathroom
On the same floor.
on the same floor. Convenient access is on the same floor. If you have to go up or downstairs to take a shower or a bath, that is not a bedroom.
Why does it need a closet? An appraiser told us it didn't need a closet because you can go to IKEA and buy a wardrobe. That's what the appraiser
And
said.
attach it to the wall.
You
I
can,
agree
yes,
with that.
and you can also take it and use it.
Of course it
Of
can.
course it can.
So
So
let's
let's
have
let
those
Mark
things
answer
with
that.
low grade, it's not.
So
I am curious.
they deal with closets. Technically, you don't have to have a closet. However, if it's a market expectation, like in every house in East Cobb, the expectation is the bedroom's gonna have a closet.
Or what, bro?
But if you go down to Grant Park, very few of the rooms have closets. you have to look at the intent of that room. What is the utility of that room? Is it used as a bedroom? Does it make sense to use it as a bedroom even though it doesn't have a closet? Then it's a bedroom. You know, a lot of this, I tell people, this isn't rocket science. You know, some appraisers tend to make it that way. It's harder than it probably needs to be. But if you just step back and look at, again, market expectation, does this meet the market expectation? If it doesn't, well, how does it impact it? So, must be above grade to be considered in an appraisal. Let me kind of clarify that.
Please.
It has to be above grade to be considered, to be included in the room count and the square footage on the appraisal. So let's talk about basements.
Yeah.
Yes.
You might be good to get out of here by 2:30.
Another class.
You're getting 7 hours of credit there. If you're first of all, I call it a basement, you call it a terrace level, it's the same thing. Right? If your feet are below grade on any level of a home, that entire level is a basement.
Your feet are below.
If I can walk out the backyard, I'm on grade, right?
Yes.
If you walk out the back, but can you walk out the front? No. That's below grade. The grade is where the dirt meets the house.
The front door, usually.
Usually. Doesn't have to be though. Wherever the dirt meets the house, if your feet are below that point, that entire level is a basement. Now, you can have basements, you can have sub-basements. If you're on a pretty steep slope, it's not uncommon to have 2 basement levels. So, on the appraisal, the line that says finished area above grade contains X number of rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, and square feet. So, if your feet are below grade, that's a basement, there's a bedroom and a bathroom down there. Is that bedroom and bathroom going to be included in that room count?
It should.
It's not.
I know what you asked.
Well, we said, yeah.
On an appraisal, if that bedroom is below grade, is it going to be included in the room count?
No.
No, it's not. Because the line that says finished area above grade contains. So, does that mean appraisers just ignore basements?
No.
Yes.
No. The basement is the most subjective part of the appraisal.
It is.
Because there's such a wide variance in how they're finished.
Right.
And the market expectation. It all comes back to that. So if the market expectation is for a house to have a basement and for it to be finished, and you can see where buyers are paying more for homes with basements, wouldn't it seem pretty logical that the appraisal should reflect that?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what if the market expectation is to have unfinished basements and you have a finished basement? That's great. That's wonderful. But the market expectation is most homes have unfinished basements. So you've over improved. That means the value of your finished basement is going to be diminished because it's above and beyond what the market expects. It's like a 3-car garage when you have a sea of 2-car garages. Or, you know, a $300,000 pool and all your other neighbors have $50,000 pools. Those are very different. Same idea, same market expectation, it's just different aspects of the property. So the basement gets adjusted twice. Once for the total basement area, the footprint, and then the second adjustment is for the finished portion of the basement. So the finished part actually gets adjusted twice. Okay? Now, that adjustment is going to reflect what the market is telling me. So, if the market expectation is to have a finished basement and is to have drywall ceiling, drywall walls, hardwood carpet tile, all this nice stuff in the basement, I need to make those adjustments to reflect that. Which means it could be higher than what some other appraisers might tell you. very seldom, in 31 years, maybe twice, have I adjusted a basement at the same level or the same rate as the above grade floors. And I do that because even though it's really nice and has all the stuff, part of it is still below grade. Part of it is still not daylight. Part of it is still not finished. So that level is somewhat diminished because of that. So, now, on top of that, let's say you have a second kitchen, a theater, and a wine cellar, all downstairs in the basement. I include those rooms on a separate line in my sales comparison grid, and I make adjustments for those specific rooms, not just the square footage of them. So, again, if the market expectation is for there to be a second kitchen in the basement, and you have that, great. But if you don't, then you're going to be hurt because, again, the market expectation is for that to be present. There's a difference between a media room and a theater. You know, there can be significant differences. Also, a big long room with a big TV at the end is not a media room. It's a room with a big TV. A media room is going to have built-in speakers or something like that. A theater is going to have, you know, probably tiered seating and you know, what you would expect to find in a theater. Now, when I'm appraising a house that has, let's say, 4 2.5 above, and then 1 in the basement. Okay, you with me? 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths up, 1 in the basement. You are marketing a 5 bedroom, 3.5 bath house.
That's an LS.
And that's MLS.
Yeah.
Right. I'm appraising a 4 bedroom house that has an extra bedroom and bath and down in the basement.
Yeah.
Those are two very different things. Okay? Also, the square footage, I don't include the basement square footage again because, well, there's lots of reasons. But I treat it separate from the rest of the house.
So is it not misleading to market on FMLS that it's a bedroom? Because I had a situation where it's not really a bedroom. There's no closet, there was no full bath, there was definitely any window down there. And the agent was listing it as a 6-bedroom home. And I'm like, no, this is not a bedroom down here. And there was only a half bath access down in that basement, not a full bath.
See, you'll notice in here, it doesn't say that you just need to have a bed in that room for it to be a bedroom. That would definitely not be.
That's just creative marketing. I mean, that's the agent's job is to.
Yeah,
Be
I mean,
creative.
that doesn't
Be creative.
That doesn't mean you can't market it that way, but you're gonna get pushback.
Yeah.
I mean, because your client says I need 4 bedrooms plus an office for my wife and I to work from home, so that's why I would count that as a bedroom to signal to a buyer, we have an extra space for you to have an office.
Yeah, and I understand completely, and I get it, and I understand FMLS tallies all those rooms, but I don't, when I do a search, I typically don't search by number of bedrooms and bathrooms. Right. Because what I'm looking at is very different than what you are marketing.
What's a basic kitchen considered? Like, how do you say that that is fully a kitchen? Countertops and cabinets and a fridge, or do you have to have?
You have to have some way to cook other than a microwave.
Okay.
It has to be a built-in appliance to cook with. Now,
Kitchenette, do you market it as a kitchenette?
what a lot of people call kitchenettes probably end up being a wet bar to me. Because if there's not a dedicated means to cook.
What about a convection microwave? My job. It's considered a convection oven. They're both in one.
Is it built in or is it countertop?
It was,
If it's built in, then
maybe
yes.
a built-in microwave convection oven. Like,
Then you
I've
need-
sold a lot of houses where you have a double oven, but the top one is a microwave convection. And I'm just curious, because I have clients asking me this question all the time, what is gonna give my house value in the basement versus?
Well, to answer your question, what gives your house value? Well,
Well,
you
yeah.
gotta know what your
In the
competition
appraisal.
has done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell people, number one, remember it's your house. And if you can afford it and you like it, then do it. Last, look at it as an investment, because I don't care what you do, not everybody's gonna like it.
When you're pulling comps and you know we have a liberal use of bedrooms, how do you take that into consideration?
Well, I don't
So if
even.
this says it's a 5, you're actually in a 5-bed. You're looking at everybody else. How do you know for a fact it is a 5-bed, or 4-bed, or 3-bed, or 2-bed?
Well, I'm gonna look through your pictures, and I'm gonna count, okay, here's a bedroom.
So you do that with all the other comps.
And also, you know, the listing, the FML listing is gonna say, upper floor has 4 bedrooms, the lower floor, which is typically the basement, has 1 bedroom. Well, but to me, that's a 4-bedroom house with a bedroom in the basement.
A lot of times you see 4 bedrooms up and it's really 3 with no problem. So you just go through the pictures.
Yeah.
And remember, he's going through the house, because he's appraising.
Well, but not the comps.
About the comp.
Oh, the comps,
Yeah,
the
she's talking
comps.
about that.
Oh, I see.
How do you use off-market comps?
Oh, boy.
Because like there's one in one neighborhood adjacent to ours, there's 5 off-market sales in the past year, so I'll send those out to neighbors, but I'm wondering how,
So the
do you grab
lenders
them,
told
do you
me,
use them?
the lenders told me if I can't verify everything about that sale, I can't use it. Which means that I don't have pictures, I don't know what it's like on the inside of that house. You can tell me it's beautiful, it's renovated, but it's all that stuff. They spent $200,000. Okay, that's great, but I can't hang my license on what you're telling me. So, off market, tell me about them. It's good information, but I can't really use it. I might be able to use it as an extra comp, but I'm not gonna hang my hat on it. Yeah.
Right, so another confession. The time
Man,
the time I did a blind offer for my buyer, big buyer's remorse, but it was saying it was a 4-bedroom. And when we saw it, the 4th bedroom, it had access to the bathroom, it had a window, had a closet, but the door was like a double door, so it's more like a living space. Would you classify that as a bedroom?
Do the doors have windows in it?
Yes. I mean, you could put blinds on them. It had blinds on them.
I probably would
But she
not.
said it wasn't good enough for a bedroom.
I probably would not, because it doesn't provide the privacy. Now, even with blinds, yeah, that's going to provide some privacy. But even if you call it a bedroom, the functionality, the utility of that room is diminished because of those doors. Because how many people want to be in a bedroom with doors with windows in it? Probably not very many. Now, it could be your guest room, you know, things like that. You could still call it a bedroom, but the utility of that room is going to be diminished because of that. You're right. You probably need to take out a break. Or do you want to? Want to keep going? Are we good?
Let's keep going.
Depends on how much more material you got to cover. You got a lot.
Oh, God. We're on slide 14.
We can do that early if you want to keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said tell me later.
It's the
So,
Samsung.
all right, is this a bedroom? Well, number one, this is in a basement, okay? It's in a basement because it has a drop ceiling, panel walls, all that. Now, assume that we're standing in the doorway, so it has a door, and just around the corner is a closet. So, is that a bedroom?
No. Is there any bathroom?
This is the
Yes.
around the corner, is a closet.
Just inside there is a closet. So
There's a
Inside.
closet.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's a bathroom
and
down
there's a
there.
full bath.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
And yes, it is a bedroom. However, I'm not going to count it in my room count because it's in the basement. Okay, all right. Just want to make sure we're clear. Okay, what about these? They have windows and their doors and
I
whatnot.
kicked my butt through that window.
Well,
I'm gonna burn.
I would not call these bedrooms because of the size of these windows. And they're way too far off the
They're
floor.
European windows, they're not these.
To qualify for a bedroom, the window has to be at least 5 square feet. It has to be operational, can't be like an atrium window. I've actually seen that in a room before. Also, it can't be more than 30 inches off the floor. If it's higher than that, technically it's not a bedroom. And how many 1970s ranches have you been in where the windows are big enough, but they're this far off the floor? Have you seen those? Have you noticed those before? Actually, I think I've been in one year. So, is that a bathroom?
That's weird today.
Oh, Lord. Here we go.
Where's the shower?
I would
Where's
not.
the shower?
It's right behind the
There's
toilet.
no shower.
It's a powder room off the room.
It's not even, I wouldn't call this a half bath or a powder. I would call this a room that has a toilet and a sink. Because the functionality, the utility of this room is not even close to being a half bath. Also, and the scary thing is, at some point, somebody must have said, hey, you know, that's a good idea. All right, the improvement section is where we talk about the actual dwelling. How many, you know, have the style, the stories, the age, the effective age, the basement, how many rooms, things like that. Yeah, right here. Finished area above grade contains 11 rooms, 5 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms. Oh, one thing, and I'll throw this in for free too. 3.1 means there's 3 full, 1 half bath. 3.2 would be 3 full, 2 half baths. Instead of putting 0.5, that doesn't translate very well. It doesn't make sense. So, yeah. All right, here's the interior of our subject property, the dining room, the half bath. Can't really see that very well, I'm sorry. That's the family room. There's a fireplace in there, I believe. There's the master bath. It's been updated. The kitchen. What's the first thing you notice about, if you can see the picture, what's the first thing you notice about this kitchen?
Not enough light.
Not enough light, right?
Stainless steel. Is
Not worse.
No.
No, that makes it worse.
What about now?
It's the same.
Is it the same?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. First thing I noticed was the hardware.
Their original cabinets.
Yeah. So they went to the effort to put in granite, stainless steel, they painted the cabinets, but you don't notice those things. You end up seeing what they didn't do. I call this putting lipstick on a pig.
Lipstick on a pig.
Because, yeah, and then, you know, I'm not saying, God bless them for putting the granite and the stainless steel and all that and painting their cabinets. At least, you know, they did that. But more often than not, the value that you get from that is going to be diminished because, again, you're going to focus on what they didn't do instead of what they've done. All right, stucco. If you knock on it, if it sounds hollow, then it's synthetic. If it sounds solid, then it's hard coat. Synthetic stucco is just styrofoam with a skim coat of cement on it, with a nylon mesh, and then cement skimmed over it. Hard coat is still styrofoam, but it's a wire mesh and a thicker coat of cement on it. You can push on synthetic and it'll give a little bit. A lot of stucco houses, hard coat stucco houses, will have synthetic stucco on the pediments around the windows or the coins on the corner, things like that. Some brick houses have, you know, stucco pediments around the windows. So that's almost guaranteed to be synthetic stucco. And here's an example of what can happen with the stucco if it's not maintained. Water gets behind it and you don't realize it, and it just sits there and sits there because there's nowhere for it to go because it's next to styrofoam. And the framing absorbs it, and eventually this is what will happen. It'll just draw it out.
Synthetic, not necessarily hard.
Correct.
How much do you adjust for synthetic? 'Cause I've gotten into some discussions with agents about the value of synthetic over hard coat, and
Well,
like, are you if you've got same neighborhood, hard coat, some synthetic, are you?
well, hard coat versus synthetic, that adjustment near as great as synthetic versus brick or even hardy plank.
Yeah.
But synthetic versus hard coat, here in East Cobb, this
Yeah.
kind of general area, probably 10 to 15,000. Now, synthetic versus brick, or synthetic versus hardy plank, 15 to 20,000. Synthetic versus brick, 25 to 30,000. Can be significant. All right, here's an example of someone adding a bathroom without getting a permit. They put it above not just a breaker box, but a screw-in fuse box. This is a fire waiting to happen. And again, somebody said, that's a good idea.
Good use of the space.
Let's do that. Yeah, everybody knows if you add a half bath, your value is going to skyrocket. So.
Pass the inspection period to get to the appraiser?
Yeah. So, all right, we do measure houses, which is another reason why it's important for you to be there at the house. Make sure the appraiser is measuring the house. A lot of appraisers don't. So. Oh, if they get out of their car with a wheel, tell them to go to Home Depot and buy a tape measure.
With a what?
One of those wheels. You can't measure a house accurately enough for an appraisal with one of those wheels. You gotta be pretty exact. Here's an example of a sketch. Now, single family homes, we measure the outside walls because that's what you own. You own all of it. Condos, we measure what we call paint to paint on the inside wall because that's what you own. The rule is if you can walk on it, you include it. Open areas, you don't include it on the second floor.
Like all the way between the bedrooms?
You can walk on it.
Two-story family room.
You include it. Yeah, a two-story family room or a two-story foyer.
I'm so confused.
On the upper floor, the second floor, we don't include that open area.
It looks down to the floor.
Because you can't walk on it.
Okay, yeah.
Now I do include the stairs on both levels. And then we add the porches, the decks, and the patios, things like that, and the garage. Now, bonus room with a sloped ceiling. Here's the deal. It has to be at least 8 feet tall. The ceiling does. Now, on this side, the ceiling slopes all the way down to the floor. Over here, there's a 5-foot knee wall. Well, that's the magic number, 5 feet. I measure down on the sloped ceiling down to 5 feet. And over here, I have to draw an imaginary line at 5 feet. And that's the point where I measure to. I do not include this little area in the square footage because it's not really functional square feet unless you're this way. Also, I add 6 inches on each side to account for the outside wall. That includes the framing and the exterior wall. And this is actually the sketch from our subject property that we saw earlier. So, this is that open foyer. And this is where the stairs would be. That's why that looks kind of funky. And the basement. Depreciation, there are 3 types. There's physical, functional, and external. Physical is just normal wear and tear that you would expect to find. The functional, well, that's an over improvement or a poor floor plan or poor design, things like that. External is anything beyond the property boundaries that's having an impact on the value, like power lines or the airport or a busy road, things like that.
Mark, would you consider functional depreciation to be painted brick?
That's a first. Wow. I should give you an extra hour credit for that. That's a good question. I've never had that question before.
Ideas, but I mean.
No, I don't think so because it's fairly common these days.
It's not over improvement. It's not going to
Yeah,
depreciate my house.
I have to admit, first thing I think of when I see painted brick.
Is that cute?
Well, it's not that, but do they have to paint that brick? Did something happen?
Oh.
Actually, there's a house in Indian Hills. It's painted brick, and it's probably 5 years ago when they did this. But right before they painted the brick, they had a huge stair step crack above their garage. You can see it from the road. and you can see the patch from the road. So they painted it right. Yeah. So, you know, my biggest fear is if the house that I'm talking about, or I'm gonna show you, is one of y'all's houses. Yeah, Mark, that was my house that I did that. No, but, so my first thought is, did they have to paint that brick? Or did they just choose to? I'm not a big fan of painted
I
brick.
think that's just. Yeah, you can read beautiful, I love it.
This is a example of a house with 0 economic life left.
Mark, that's my house.
Another extra. Well said. Now, every house that's built originally has an economic life of roughly 60 years. So if you don't do anything to it for 60 years, this is what you're gonna end up with. Now, effective age is a function of the income approach and part of the depreciation. And so the more you maintain your house, the further you go, the further you get to your economic life. So if your house is actually 20 years old, but you've painted, you put in granite, you've done all this stuff to it, the effective age might be 10. So the more you maintain your house, you never get to the end of your economic life. It's just if you don't maintain it, you're gonna end up like that. Yes?
What if you don't update it, but everything is like meticulously maintained?
That's fine. If you maintain it, that's fine. Your effective age will never get to the end of your economic life. It's just your effective age will be higher than those that have been upgraded or updated. Nothing wrong with that. And this little section is the cost approach. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. If you have questions, I'll rather answer them. But all right, so for an appraisal to be done as is, a house has to be safe, sound, and habitable. Well, if you're in the middle of a kitchen renovation and you don't have a kitchen because you don't have appliances installed, I have to make my appraisal subject to it being finished. Dang it. Every one that I do for you is subject to completion because I'm usually there when you're toward the end of your renovation. And so yeah. What if there's a hole in the roof? I have to make it subject to that being repaired. Or if there's water in the basement, I have to make it subject to that being fixed. Things like that.
Mark, did you go to the top of the roof?
I do not go on the roof.
No,
No.
I mean, it's something that you should do, or just look up the roof from the street, and if it looks good, you can go for that.
Well, I look at the roof from the street, and I see as much of the roof as I can see. If I have questions about it, I'm going to ask you. You know, if it looks like it's not new, then I'm going to say, how old's the roof? But I don't go up on the roof.
Okay,
Does
we don't know how much.
Drone inspection makes sense.
Home inspectors, actually most home inspectors today will use a drone instead of getting up on the roof.
Or they go to the attic and see they have some spots,
Yeah.
so they.
Yeah. You know, I do look in the attic when I do my appraisal. All right, tax records, consistently inconsistent. All right, here's some Zillow information. Zillow says the house is worth $500,000, but if they're within 5% of that, that's a $25,000 error. Who's going to accept that? But I think we probably all realize that before they call you guys, they probably go to Zillow, don't they? That's probably one of the first things you have to talk about if you're listening to them, isn't it? I would imagine. And Zillow only has a 40% chance of getting this close. 10% is a $50,000 difference, and 20% is $100,000, and they only get that 84% of the time.
Can you send us those slides?
Pardon me?
We can share those?
It's on Zillow's website.
Oh, yeah.
Zillow publishes it.
They change it as it.
Now we have like how many has
Yeah.
I like how
We have a saying about Zillow. Zillow's not always high. Zillow's not always low. Zillow's just always wrong.
Do you see it leaning one way or the other?
Pardon me?
Over or short?
I don't know.
I thought I got out, they couldn't keep leaving that to the place for purchasing
Yeah.
homes.
Listen to your realtor. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. All right, this is a house that someone at DS1P actually appraised. So we know the square footage, we have the sketch. Tax records say 4,600 square feet plus a basement of 2,700 square feet. Big house. Here's a sketch. Here's the main floor. There's not a second floor. Here's the basement. So on the appraisal, it says there's 2,700 square feet, not 4,600 square feet plus a basement.
Wow.
So that tax record is very wrong.
Wow.
Here's another example. Again, someone at DS Murphy appraised this house, so we have the sketch. Tax records say 4,500 plus 27 in the basement. Here's a sketch. Here's the first floor. Here's a second floor. Well, the basement, oh, there's not a basement. This house doesn't have a basement. So the tax record said 4,500 plus 2,700 square foot basement.
Is that initiated like when the builder says, hey, this is what I think I'm gonna build on that lot, and they put it in for it?
That's what that's what originally populated the tax record for the square footage and the rooms and all that.
Do you all measure the, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna clarify, so building square feet, that includes the basement, right?
Actually, it depends which
You
county.
see above ground and below ground, or above grade, below grade, building square feet, basement square feet. So you see all those breakdowns on the tax record, but when I see building square feet, that includes the basement, right?
Well, it depends on which county it
I don't
is.
think Incommon doesn't have.
This one is actually, I want to say Gwinnett County, this is Forsyth
I just
County.
deduct, you know, from the total. I see building square feet as the total house.
Everything.
Yes, that's, and if anybody, I don't know, what do you guys think? That's what I
That
think.
is inherently the problem.
Well, no, I mean, I look at it.
Yeah, I would say
equally,
it's
though.
1,800 square feet above grade.
Cause there, yeah,
I know there's
that's-
no basement, but.
Well, see, that's just it. They said it's the basement, but there's not a basement.
Sure.
So,
Well, yeah.
But so, my point is, don't always trust the tax record.
Oh, no, we
sometimes that's all you have, I get that, but be careful.
Are you measuring the lot too, because the tax record, especially in Cobb County, is wrong like by half a lot?
I'm glad you said that. I don't actually measure the lot, but I get a copy, I can either find a copy of the survey
That
that's
shows
been
the measurements.
recorded, or there's a database that appraisers use called CompFlow. Those of you have been in real estate for a little while, you've heard of RedLink? RedLink became CompFlow, essentially. And CompFlow has plats in it. And so I can do it from there too.
Because Cobb County will say like half an acre, you know, quarter acre,
Yeah,
and if you
that's
look at the
half.
measurements, it's 100 by 200, which is a half acre, so.
If you go to CRS and Georgia MLS, they'll show you a different amount.
Yeah.
So it's like, where
Yeah.
are these populating from?
I would suggest just go look at the deeds. And if you can find a legal description that tells you the size of the lot, I would use that.
You know, I'd almost say measure the dog, because that one you did for us 2 weeks ago, the builder said it was 3,120. You went in and it was 3,700. Because it didn't list a finished third floor.
Right.
Something short of
Oh, yeah.
measuring it yourself, I don't know how.
Well, probably when the builder when he got his permit, he probably wasn't planning on finishing it. Well, actually, he may have, but he told me he wasn't going to because he had to pay less for this permit then. So. All right, comparables. How do you choose comparables? Well, let me say this. The first place I look for a comparable is in the subdivision.
Right.
Not the neighborhood, the subdivision. I always look just in the subdivision first, and then if I need to, I'll expand my search. But if I'm in a subdivision, a good example is Indian Hills. There's always plenty of data in Indian Hills because it's such a huge subdivision. But I live in Fox Hollow, just right over here. there's not really a lot going on here because it's a relatively smaller neighborhood, subdivision, right? So if there's not enough data, there's not enough sales or active or pendings, I know I'm going to have to go outside. I'm going to have to expand my search parameters. Well, how do you do that? Well, number one, I look at proximity. The very best comp is always going to be the most recent and the closest. Because it's in the same immediate area. It's like the condo I just did on Canton Street. Right there in the middle of Canton Street. Huge factor. Next, how recent are the sales? I want to stay within 90 days. I'm not always able to do that. So I might expand 180 days. I still can't find something. I'll go back 365 days. I'm a little leery of going back that far just because the market a year ago was very different than it is today. So I want to be very careful about that. A common question is, would you rather have a very recent sale or one that's closer by? Well, actually, I'd rather have both. But if I have to choose between proximity or distance or how recent it is, I'll choose the more recent sale, even if it's further away. Now, if I have an older sale in the subdivision, I'm going to use that one too. I'll use both of them. But if I have a recent sale that's not in the subdivision, a dated sale that's not in the subdivision, I may not use that one. It might be better to use one that's further away, but more recent, more indicative of today's market. Yeah.
When you go to proximity, do you go with mileage, school district, city? Because like some of them, Woodstock are pulled in Canton, and Canton, I would argue, it's not selling for the same price as Woodstock.
Well, typically, I'm going to start in the school district. I'm going to start in the elementary school because that's the smallest area, that's the closest by. Then I'll go out to the middle school, and if I need to, I'll go out to the high school. But like here, right? If I'm in the Dodge and Walton district, I have to be specific when I'm looking for comps. Say Dodge and Walton. If I just put in Dodge, I'm going to go to Pope also. Right. So again, you got to know your market. Then I look at the similarity in style, size, age, and condition. I just kind of self-explanatory to me, but I look through all of the pictures like we talked about. I look at how the comparables are different, how they're similar compared to the subject property. Even in terms of how many hardwood floors there are, or compared to, what if a comp has, I have a train, which is this video of a house. It had, I'm not kidding you, every room had a different color in it. Pink, yellow, purple, green, blue. Every color was in this house. And do buyers like it?
No.
No, they don't. So,
One crazy buyer.
one crazy buyer might, yeah, you never know. So I look through all the pictures, I read through your listing, and then I make adjustments or I decide, is one just not that similar to ours, or is it a lot nicer? Is it not as nice? Whatever it is, I need to look at it and decide if it's comparable or not. Then I'll look at the other factors like acreage, pools, barns, outbuildings, sheds, second kitchens. We call them accessory dwelling units. It's within the house, but it has to have a kitchen, a sleeping area, and a bathroom. Or it's an in-law suite or a king suite, something like that. That's going to be a factor. That's going to affect that. What else?
Excuse me, if you have a full true kitchen and a basement and living area, how much adjustment do you accommodate for that?
What's your price range?
You like in $500,000 home, but that sort of setup is in the basement.
Just for the fact that it has the kitchen, that second kitchen, in that price range, probably 10,000, 15, it's really nice. In the $500,000 price range is probably not a huge market expectation, as opposed to the $700,000 price range, where it probably is more of an expectation. But good grief. Today, the $700,000 market was the $500,000 market a year ago.
What about if the buyers who control the demand to put think that it's worth like $150,000? Because then the home goes for like $650 instead of half of it.
That's what I said.
So okay, so the house is $500,000, but because it has that setup, like I just described, buyer puts $650,000, and that's what the home sold for. Because to that buyer, that was a very valuable feature. Because, I guess they saw it as, okay, probably extra income for them, because it's like a whole self-contained world out there, because it has a full kitchen, a true kitchen with a built-in stove and everything.
Well, honestly, the only true way to know what that number is, that adjustment, is to go through the process, find a comp that has a second kitchen, find a comp that doesn't have a second kitchen, and based on that analysis. So, but yeah, so to your buyer, they loved it, and so they're willing to pay more for it. To another buyer, they may like it, they might pay you $10,000.
Do you, Mark, on the similarity, do you only, if you have a subdivision with houses, do you only do colonials that are on a slab versus ones on basement? Will you use those comps, or you tend to stay away from basement houses for slabs and vice versa?
I would rather stay away from them if it's possible. Now, if it's in the subdivision, then I'll probably use it because of where it is and how close it is. But ideally, if I'm on a slab, I'm going to find comps on a slab, and vice versa. Because typical buyer, if they're looking for a basement house, they're probably not looking at homes on the slab. All right, here's an example of our sales comparison grid, and here are the lines where we make the adjustments for the basement. So here's the total basement, here's the finished basement, and the rooms. Adjustments are subjective, but they must be supportable. I have to be able to prove my adjustments based on the market data. The income approach is used primarily by commercial appraisers because commercial property is all about income production. Residential appraisers can do the income approach from time to time, primarily on multifamily homes or very seldom do I do an income approach on a single family home, because to establish a gross rent multiplier, you have to have comparables that were sold as investment properties. And single family homes tend to become investment properties after they're sold, but very seldom are they sold as investment properties. The purpose of the adjustment is to make the comparable equal to the subject property. Okay? So, your subject property is here, and your comp is bigger. You make a negative adjustment to bring it down equal. If it's smaller, you make a positive adjustment. Comp better subtract, comp inferior add. The very best adjustment is always going to be 0. That means I found a comparable that has that same factor, like your second kitchen, or being on the golf course, or having 7 fireplaces. Whatever it is, I have to have a comp that has that same factor. Like our 2-story with a basement. If you have an unfinished basement, but all of your comps have finished basements, have you really proven the value? Well, no. You have to have a comp that also has an unfinished basement. All right, here's an example of this house actually has a very large lot for where it is. It's a double lot. And I know this is hard to see, but in each of the comparables, they're all considerably smaller than the subject property's lot. So they made positive adjustments across the board. So in this case, it's 300,000, it's 275, and that's 275. $275,000 for the size of the lot difference. Which I'm not saying that's the wrong number, but the fact is, all of the comparables require a positive adjustment. So you don't really know if that's true, if that is the appropriate adjustment or not. You have to bracket the subject property, which means that you have to have one that's bigger and one that's smaller. Like in that example, all of those lots are considerably smaller. Now, they're all close by, they're all very close by, but none of them have a bigger lot. So we didn't bracket the lot size in this case. This one, talking about bracketing square footage, again, one that's bigger, one that's smaller. When you bracket the subject property in terms of adjustments, they go both directions, okay? And if they go both directions, you can figure out if that adjustment is correct, because it'll balance each other out. That makes sense to everybody?
So Mark, back on the lot, so say you have an acre lot listing and then, you know, the best comps around it are half or whatever. So in summary, how are you making that adjustment?
Well, I need to go out and find a comparable that has at least an acre or maybe more, ideally more. Then that way my adjustment is going to go, they're going to be both directions.
You just move it out.
Expand my search parameter. And that's not just for lot size. That's for square footage, that's for condition and quality, location, all those things. All right, we've done all the comparables, we've talked about the different approaches to value, then we have to reconcile all of it. And this is what I call kind of telling your story. And this is the narrative part of the appraisal, where the appraiser has the ability, or the opportunity rather, to tell your story. Why did I pick these comps? What is it about the subject property? What parameters did I use when I looked for comparables? Why did I make certain adjustments? Why did I not make certain adjustments? Things like that. That way, when you read the appraisal, you'll have an understanding rather of how I came about to the opinion of value. If I just put a number on it without any explanation, it doesn't really make sense a whole lot. So, again, more about bracketing, we talked about that. Oh, one thing, and could be a red flag, pay attention. Down at the bottom, there's going to be percentages. Net and gross percentages. Net and gross adjustment percentages. The net adjustment should be less than 15%, and the gross adjustment should be less than 25%. Well, in this case, these are all well above those percentages. Now, this is our example with a high site size adjustment, so it's not surprising that these are relatively high adjustments. But what this tells you is, if all those percentages are a good bit higher, well, what that means is those comparables really aren't that similar. Because you had to make a lot of adjustments. Think about it. The more similar it is, the fewer adjustments you need to make. Right. All right. Things that make you go, that is not an A-frame house. Just because it says it on the listing does not make it true. These are townhomes, these are condos, but they're in the same community. Would you ever use one as a comp for the other?
One would be reasonable,
Yeah, these are owned as condominiums. These are actually fee simple townhomes. Townhome is a style. is not a form of ownership. So these are fee simple, so no,
No.
you would not use each other for a comp, for each other. This is why you should probably not do a drive-by appraisal, because that house is a trailer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, they're weird.
Yeah. They went through the effort and trouble to build this shell around this trailer, which, good for them. All right. This is interesting. I'm sorry you can't see it very well, but at the bottom of this grid, the price range is 3.9 million to 4.1 million. But the value down at the bottom is 7.2 million. This is actually an example of mortgage fraud. From 2020. They took an appraisal and they modified the PDF version of it, but all they did was change the value. They didn't change the comparables. So, like, thankfully, this criminal is not really smart. But anyway. All right, what's wrong with this house? Where's the foyer?
On this, is that more?
Where's the foyer?
Below grade.
Below grade.
Yeah, it's below grade.
It's a raised, it's a two-story. It's the raised ranch, is it?
Yeah.
Raised two-story.
Yeah, it's a raised two-story.
Yeah.
So, again, do a lot of buyers want to have a foyer down in the basement?
No.
Probably not. Here's the garage level. Yeah. All right, quiz time. You ready? What style of house is that?
Traditional.
All right, just because of that, we're gonna stay till 2 o'clock.
Ranch or bungalow?
Bungalow.
Okay, so somebody explain the difference to me, because people use them interchangeably.
They do what?
They use ranch style and bungalow interchangeably.
Well,
It's just a trendy term on it.
well, well, a bungalow tends to be more compact, smaller houses. A ranch is more, widespread. That doesn't make sense. They tend to be
I get it.
a bigger footprint.
Yeah, okay, got it.
What is that?
Split level.
Split foyer, split level. That's a split foyer.
Split foyer?
Yeah.
Tradition?
Ranch.
Ranch.
That's a ranch. You see the difference?
Yes.
Okay.
What kind of adjustments
Tutor.
would you?
Color.
I'm sorry.
Tutor.
What kind of adjustments would you make with a split level or split foyer as to like that or the
Or ranch.
normal?
Not really comparable.
Well,
If they're in
ideally,
the same neighborhood.
if I'm
because it's-
appraising a split foyer or split level, I'm going to look for split level, split
Okay.
foyer comparables.
So if there's only like 3 inches in that neighborhood, would you go outside or could you use something in there? What, it'd be better to.
I
get
can use a
something-
ranch, especially if it has a basement.
Okay. Alright.
So, all right, what is that?
Tutor.
Tutor, yeah, that's an easy one.
Farmhouse.
Farmhouse? Yeah, old craftsman, yeah. Actually, we should probably change that, because everybody answers farmhouse.
Now, yeah.
Modern.
Modern, contemporary, yeah. Honestly, I don't know the difference between a modern and contemporary. Well, I'll take that back. See, I think of that as more modern
Yeah.
as opposed to contemporary. I think of contemporary, the cedar siding,
Yeah.
weird
Angles.
angles, yeah.
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod, yeah.
It's modern.
Yeah.
A-frame.
A-frame. Hopefully that's up on the lake.
Wow.
Oh.
Is that attached to that one house?
Now, this is ultra modern, ultra contemporary. They look like containers sometimes.
Yes.
So they're actually bigger than containers, but they, yeah, it's ultra modern. Now,
Do something with containers.
good news is, this house just sold last week, it closed, so that's the perfect comp for this house, right?
No.
Right, yeah, I would imagine there used to be something that looked just like that on this lot.
Yeah.
They tore it down and built that house. But no, that would not be a comparable, even though it just sold. Now, for comps for this, your search parameters went from this to this, right? That's an architect's house. It's another modern house. You see, it's kind of the wavy roof, not very many windows, kind of a going into a tunnel almost. The story behind this, actually, I got lucky. One time in my class a couple of years ago, someone had listed this. An architect built it, as you can probably guess. And just a classic example of the homeowner thinking a lot more of his house than anybody else does. And he priced it way too high. Never sold. I think they only had a few showings. Never sold it. And so that listing expired, and that was a little bit. So, what about that?
Yeah.
That's a gas.
57,000.
Is there a moat? We need a moat.
Yeah.
It's like a castle.
Yeah,
The one
up in,
in,
Alpharetta.
yeah, is that the one?
No,
No, the moat in
Yeah.
Alpharetta.
This house, actually, the guy called Scott Murphy to come appraise it. Scott went up there, he actually measured it, but yeah, you can't, there are no comparables. The only approach to value would be the cost approach. How about that?
Wow.
That's the market rental house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Midtown.
That's historic property.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be zoned?
So how would you go about marketing that house? How would I go about valuing that house?
It's not really great.
That's,
Yeah.
that's one of a kind.
A lot of upgrades.
So, yeah.
Need that or something, do they?
So, things that bring the least amount of return on your investment typically are excessive landscaping. Landscaping is good to a point, but unless you're a master gardener, you have a lot of landscaping, a lot of buyers, that just looks like work.
Right, so sellers go, I spent $60,000 in my landscaping operation, I should at least get $60,000 extra. So, yeah, so what's the percentage if, okay, your landscaping is just out of this world? What am I adding to the, nothing? Oh,
My
God.
wife's a master gardener, we sold 500 houses, and it's every time we live there. Because nobody wants to come in and cost of keeping all that stuff.
It's work to maintain that. Absolutely.
But you can't tell them it doesn't add anything to the value.
It does to them because they love it. That's their passion. I get that. But typical buyer, that's not their passion. Finishing a basement, typically not a great investment. Pools are as popular as they've ever been. And the adjustments that we make for them now are bigger than they've ever been. But they're still a bad investment. They still cost a lot more than the adjustment we're gonna make. Mechanicals, energy efficient items. Mechanicals, that's just, that's maintaining the house, energy efficient items like, oh gosh, probably 10 or 15 years ago, I appraised a house. These people had a geothermal heating system in their house. And he gave me all kinds of details, and it cost them like $35,000.
Sorry.
Back in that.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Is there a comp out there that has that? No. No. There might be one now, but 50 years ago, there sure was. But today's world, solar panels, they're becoming very popular, but they're still not mainstream. And so people with solar panels are, that's fine, but I don't think people are gonna buy a house because you have solar panels.
That's your midtown.
Yeah, maybe. All right, return on pools, like I said, they're gonna cost a lot more than you're gonna get for them. The greatest return, increasing your curb appeal. The first time people see a house is online, in a picture. So increase your curb appeal. Kitchens and master baths always have and probably always will sell houses. But if you do those things, you're gonna get the greatest return. Interior paint, the current colors. Paint is still a relatively inexpensive improvement, but it's still something that people have to do. Replacing old or worn out carpeting, exterior paint, interior hardware. Like that kitchen we saw the other day, earlier. They did most everything except for the hardware.
He actually improved by painting red brick white.
We do it on all of our flips, it makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
Especially on older homes, especially if they look old, putting a fresh coat of paint on the exterior makes it top.
I got told the greatest return on investment percentage wise was the garage door.
Really?
Someone trying to sell me windows, because he was showing that windows were like third or fourth in terms of percentage of cost to return on investment. He said garage door, people walk up, like drive up to your house, they're on your driveway, the first thing they see.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Which I thought was really interesting.
That
I mean, that was obviously a salesman, but I just thought that was
Well, yeah,
because they have the list.
Yeah.
And that was just one piece that said their percentage was.
That's interesting.
Garage
I'm
door.
not terribly surprised, because that's, that's the curb appeal. That
Yeah,
is the
curb
real-
appeal, that's what I thought when you said that, I'm like, well, I guess that would maybe find factor.
In today's world, carriage style doors are very popular. So if your garage doors have that look to them, they're gonna look more modern, more up to date.
What about new windows? Do you get the new windows amount that you pay?
No.
That was in the last one.
No.
Sorry, I missed.
It's a maintenance item.
Yeah, windows are sort of lease, on the lease return, right?
The detriment is much greater than the benefit.
How about attached versus detached garage? I meant to ask you that earlier.
I kind of look at a detached garage similar to a built-in or drive-under garage. Most people don't want those, because you still have to go, even though you don't have to go up or down stairs to get to your garage, you still have to go outside. And most
So-
people don't want to carry their groceries in the rain.
So like what, so I know it's based on the cost of the house, right, but like, okay, let's say a $400,000 house.
Detached versus
What kind of
attached?
number are you adjusting? Yes,
Probably $10,000.
$10,000.
It's not a huge amount, but
But still.
yeah. We can talk to appraisers. Well, we talked about that. You guys can. Talk about that. Are loan officers allowed to talk to appraisers? Well, yes and no. I can talk to a loan officer about scheduling an appointment, or how fast I can do an appraisal, or what we had for lunch yesterday. We can't talk about value. That's the rule. Cannot talk about value. So that's kind of where we are with, that's the gist of the information I have for you.
When the lender says we have our own set of appraisers, so we never have any problem with appraisals, is that really true, or they just are saying, hey, we tend to not have problems with appraisals?
If you've ever had an appraisal done, if you're in the lending world, you've had a problem with an appraiser at some point.
Are we
You're
more likely
bound
to have problem appraisers where it comes in with like a Quicken mortgage and the guy from Kentucky's getting sent down to Cobb County, or?
Lenders matter. You know, if your buyer says, hey, I can get a quick and cheap loan from Quicken, I'm gonna save $300, give your client $300.
Yes.
It's just not worth the headache. It's just not worth it.
Will you go back one slide?
Oh, yeah.
I want to take a picture of that.
Oh, yeah. And talk about our consultation appraisal a little bit. I know I've done a lot of consultations appraisals for you guys, a lot of people in the attorneys. The consultation appraisal is good because it helps the homeowner understand the value of the property and understand the market conditions that we're in right now. And there's several other things we talked about, but the value of this appraisal is on the back end. If the lender sends out their appraiser and it still comes in less than your sales price, that's when I get back into the process and I will review that appraisal. I'll write a rebuttal letter. I'll do all that for you so you don't have to. Now, the vast majority of the time when we do a consultation appraisal, there's not an issue with the lender. Because, number one, like I said, when you meet the appraiser there, you're giving them all that information. Give them a copy of my appraisal.
Yeah.
That way they have that information. And if there's someone who doesn't know the market very well, I've done their job for them. All right. This is our sign out.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, yes. Questions?
Questions from the appraisals.
Okay.
Right, so when an appraiser walks in, the certified appraiser, some of the agents are concerned about condition of home. Can you briefly touch on what we're looking for?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. So the question is FHA appraisals. What do the appraisers look for? Well, FHA is more concerned about health and safety issues. Now, there are certain things that need to be in place. The utilities have to be on. All the windows have to be operable. If there are bars on the windows, they have to be the quick release type, so that if you're inside the house and you can flip a little switch and the bars will open, that's fine. Vast majority of those are not. But I'm gonna turn on the appliances, I'm gonna turn on the heat and air, I'm gonna try the windows, I'm gonna plug in, I'm gonna try all the outlets. If your soffit is less than 3 feet from the house, you have to have gutters and downspouts. And the downspout has to empty the water at least 4 feet away from the foundation, which is solved with either one of those flexible tubes or one of those little, I call it a tray, whatever. But you'd be surprised how many people don't have that. So, but really, again, it's primarily health and safety issues. If there are more than 2 steps up to a porch, you have to have a handrail. If the porch is more than 30 inches off the floor, off the ground, you have to have a railing.
So we're not concerned about wood rot unless it's just extensive across the.
If there's wood rot, if there's wood rot, that has to be replaced. If there's peeling or chipping paint, that has to be replaced. I'm sorry. The appraiser number, that's my license number. You put in your real estate license number. You can leave that in blank.
I've heard that conventional appraisals are coming back with repairs yet. I haven't seen any of that. Is that true?
They're coming back what?
The conventional appraisals are coming back where the appraiser is still saying that they just need to do repairs done. Is that true?
Well,
I've heard that. I haven't.
What happens typically in a conventional setting is I'll tell the lender, there's some rotting wood here, there's some peeling paint there. I'll send it in. The lender then decides, what's this say? And then they'll come back and say, we want to make it subject to those reports. So usually that's usually the lender. Now, if it's extensive, I still may not call for a repair. I just make the appraisal, the condition of the property reflect what it truly is. I said earlier we have a home inspection division. Well, Scott Katz is one of our rock star home inspectors. And so we started the home inspection division 4 or 5 years ago. And so Scott is here to certainly talk to you about that, answer any questions that you may have about home inspections or any issues that come up with you guys, or if you have any questions for me, I'm glad to help you with that.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because it's nice outside. It's been a while. So, my name is Scott. I've been doing home inspections for about 4 years here. Grew up in construction. My dad used to buy and sell houses. Age 5, he thought it'd be fun for summers to go pull carpet for him and paint and all that stuff. 5, I know. But I learned valuable lessons and good work ethic. Yeah, so DS Murphy, Scott, a while back, a lot of realtors and brokers came to him and said, hey, you got such an awesome appraisal company. Why don't you start doing home inspections? And he scratched his head and said, yeah, that's a good idea. So they did a survey, and a lot of the agents said, we want reports that are concise, to the point. We don't want them long-winded. We don't want to scare clients away, calling for specialists on every single finding. We use drones, we use flare cameras, we have partnered up with Arrow for free WDO inspection. We also do consultation inspections. I got one in my pocket, so you'll have a chance to win one today. Up to 400.
So the consultation inspection is, well, kind of explain that. That's something that you can provide the homeowner that's, you don't have to disclose that, correct?
Yeah, that's beneficial to a seller if they want to know all the pitfalls that may come up on an inspection. So we walk through the property with the agent or the homeowner and try to figure out the big pitfalls that need to be addressed. And
How much does that cost to the seller?
well, we do it by square footage. That's how we base our prices.
What's a rough range, like, let's say,
What's the
for
start at?
2,500 square foot home?
I think our prices went up a little bit because of inflation. 400 is our baseline.
Okay.
And how fast can you get out? If I call the Murphy and say, hey, I went on contract, I have 2 days, can you get out tomorrow?
Oh, we're quick. We got about 5 of us here in Atlanta. And our turnaround time is 24 hours.
Yeah, how do we book you or your company?
You can go online. We have a web.
Good job.
Thank you.
You do, radon, stucco, I mean, is that, I guess, is there an extent of services that are additional that?
We do have additional services, radon testing, mold,
Sure.
pull and spot, we do stucco, we actually have a pro.
Sewer, we do sewer too?
We used to have a company that we were working with, but they moved back to Colorado.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, cause that's the big one.
That's
That's
the
the
big
big
one, yeah.
Yes. Doing new construction, I never went to the 2x4 new construction in the sewer, I do it all the time. The sewer line.
So let's see, how are we gonna get away with
Okay, I have for the free consultation inspection, I have a trivia question for you. So the first person to raise your hand with the correct answer gets it. So, tradition in Scotland, once you pay off their mortgage, what do homeowners do?
They drink, man.
Yes.
What's that?
Drink.
Paint their door red.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So, you need a consultation first.
What,
Hey,
are you
consultation.
Scottish?
No, I'm not Scottish.
Disqualifies
Just happen to
you.
know
All right, before we get out of here, real quick, I want to make sure that everyone sign out. Okay, any issues with signing out?
I didn't even know landmarks.
If I can do it, anyone can do it.
I didn't sign it.
Grace has the work behind.
I'm like the manual old school mark, can I just sign it?
What?
Danielle?
Just need your license number.
Good to see you too. Hopefully see you again next year. One for
Okay,
She was asking if they could work in general. Thank you, very comparable stuff aside, craziness of this market is everybody knowing the demand, how high prices are. To you, I'll just, you can answer. Is there like a percentage that raise a house? I mean, obviously you don't look at everything, but I'm just curious, is there an amount that might?
So this one has a top. So whoever was so it's like two primary.
The percentage increase in the last 90 days.
I've always wanted to
It's
know
kind
how
of
much
from what it was 6 months ago, a year ago. It's still going And the product is formed within our appraisal report that talks about market conditions. But a lot of times, that's the data, but it's not really saying a lot of what the market conditions are. Which is because the data that we're looking at is unadjusted comparable. It's not adjusted to make it similar to our performance. And so that is inherently flawed. So you use that, but then on top of that, you also look at the market, price, ratio, that's over 100%, or the month supply. The data says that the values of sales prices have been stable. But if it's a shortage, and the days on market is very low, and if list price is going up, even though that sales price data tells me it's stable, I know that it's not. I know that the market's going up.
So you might bump it, so if everything you evaluate came in at price, max price, when you're looking at those trends, you're seeing that, if I'm a listing agent, I'm worried about it, or whatever, you might bump it up 10,000, let's say, based on those trends or the market that you're seeing that's going on. Not, I mean, just because the comps show this, you might go ahead and, let's say, that makes sense.
It's just reflective of the appreciation that's happening. In 2010, now the market's instead of a loss, it's the same positive. It's just a positive indicator now instead of a negative.
So it doesn't and bathroom is a bathroom, it's you know what, desires to be able to say, what's gouging, what's price gouging,
Only on the board last night, I got trying to get it on now. Like, I know there's a house that's just closed to my really shouldn't even say what I want to know. I don't want to know the real buyers is. And the house is crazy. I don't know how to do it myself. What the price is. I don't know. You've got meaning. I don't know. What if I send you an appraisal report and I'm having you come list
right on the corner.
Does that
what would a person
buyer to me, that's what houses really work. Well, I guess that is, but you know, back in demand, it's about market rate, and that's how you frame it, so I guess in theory, it would be a good call.
You're welcome. And so that's just, this is the value time. Talk about how that, really just sold for whatever, but then they changed the listing and make it much less.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, that's weird.
I'm glad she brought up.
Yeah, that is.
So I guess in theory, it's just based on buyer demand.